Say a few words?
No, I don't think it's very necessary. I just wanted to tell you that I do have the camera on and the microphone is on. I absolutely guarantee that it will work today.
Okay. All right. Cool. Oh, hello, piano geeks and fans. Back for another episode of PSI. This is wonderful. Meet my co-host.
Mark?
This is Mark. I'm Elmer. And once again, we are PSI Piano Scene Investigations.
How you doing?
Hello to you.
And I want to, I think if you watched the little show that happened last week, my friend, who I've known for a long time, we met over in Europe a long time ago. He actually wrote me and called me when I was doing a radio show in Cyprus in the summertime on BRT, which was Northern Turkish Cypriot radio. I did a summer show every Friday night. I think it was 2 or 3 hours. I can't remember now. We had a lot of fun, did a lot of cool stuff. Anyway, Dmitri must have heard me doing the show, and he wrote me a letter and introduced himself. And as you now may know from his little talk, he's in Novosibirsk, and his grandma studied with Liszt. Well, why don't you tell him, Dmitri? Yes, my name is Dmitri Posnikovich, and I'm very happy to be here with Mr. Elmer, and of course my dear friend Mr. Mark. Mr. Elmer, I'm very pleased to meet you in person finally. I think you're very handsome and very kind of sexy guy and very intelligent. You're a very impressive fellow. I think you should develop a great following, hopefully.
Let's see.
Yeah, let's hope so. Well, anyway, yeah, my grandmother, she studied with Franz Liszt. She kind of did more than study with him, but she was a student, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then after she died, she left me her piano and all of her books and her music and everything. And then when as I refer to them, my filthy captors, they sent me to the East. I finally managed, after the time, the ball fell in '89 and so on. They kind of forgot about this out there. And so finally, I just found a house in Novosibirsk, my dacha. I live in a dacha. And that's where I stay all the time. And I used to send informations on music history, on things like that to Mark that he could use on his radio show. So I don't know, but maybe once in a while I could continue to do that, although I don't want to step on Mr. Elmer's toes because he always has so much fascinating things to say, but maybe once in a while if you want to know something, especially about obscure Russian or something like that, you could ask me and maybe I'll send you some information. But I'm in Ohio right now and it pleased me very much to be here on the Marc and Elmer's PSI. One of the best shows, I think, on the entire internet. Well, thank you.
Well, thank you there.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. Oh, and by the way, if you like our content, enjoy the show, enjoy our company, please subscribe, push the like button, tell your friends, family, and coworkers and your neighbors about us so that we could increase our number of subscribers. Hopefully we have like always, I still think we get better at this each week. It's wonderful. Always bringing in new stuff. Oh, and by the way, shall I introduce our new segment?
Oh, sure, yeah.
Okay, well,
Are we start it now?
we could. All right,
Okay.
well,
We're going to get started right off the bat with the same thing that we did last week.
right.
Which, yeah, it's blinking, right? Yeah, it's blinking. See the red stuff?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, all right, so it's working. We talked for nearly 3 hours, and I'm sure you're going, oh my God, thank God it didn't tape. We're not going to talk that long today.
No,
We're
we're
going to cut
not.
it down a bit. But yeah, we got a new segment, and it has to do with this book that we, for a while, been promoting, saying we were going to talk about.
Yeah.
Why don't you go ahead?
Okay, well, today PSI presents our newest segment to the show, PSI Undercover.
How we can talk. So. Oh, thank God, I'm fine. I'm so happy I could look at you at that. So just so, okay.
All right. Okay. Well, welcome to PSI Undercover. And the book that we brought in today, you thought we were actually going to go out and be undercover, didn't you? No, actually, undercover is a play on words. We're talking about the cover of the book, under the cover. Get it? Anyways, the book today is Josef Lhevinne's Basic Principles in Piano Forte Playing with a New Forward by Rosina Lhevinne, his wife.
The original book, or the stories anyway, the chapters came out in 1924, which was right at the time that he and Rosina were hired onto the Juilliard faculty, new school. And then when Dover reissued this, I think it was 1970, she wrote a foreword to it, 72.
Mm-hmm.
She wrote a foreword to it because she lived a long time. She was younger than her husband.
Oh, yeah.
By a bit.
I wrote a bio.
Oh, cool.
So we didn't talk very much about Lhevinne except for how much we really love his playing and his backgrounds. But I have here some very surprising information. Looked it up on Wikipedia here, and it is, his original name is Josef, with a PH, Arkadyevich.
Arkadyevich, yeah.
Lhevinne, Levin.
Yeah.
I bet you some of you didn't know that. Mm-hmm. Okay, he was born on December 13th, 1874, and he died on December 2nd, 1944, just a few days before his 70th birthday. Mm-hmm. He was born in Oryol, or Oriol? I don't know. It's south of Moscow. And he studied at the Imperial Conservatory of Moscow with Vasily Safonov, Imperial Conservatory. I would imagine it's just before it became, Moscow Conservatory. But it says here, his public debut at age 14, performing the Emperor Concerto, conducted by none other than
Anton Rubinstein.
Anton Rubinstein, exactly.
This morning,
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. Now, eventually he would graduate in 1892 with a gold medal for playing the piano, along with his comrades, Rachmaninoff and Scriabin.
Could you imagine that?
Yeah, I know. The three of them. Boy.
Young boys.
Yeah.
And the geniuses. I mean, it reminds me when Rubinstein was, was it the Chopin competition that Paulini won?
Yeah, it was the Chopin competition.
And Rubinstein was on the jury.
The committee, yeah.
With all these other great pianists, and Paulini won it that year.
Yeah.
And Rubinstein famously said, "This kid has more talent than all of us here at the table." Can you imagine Rachmaninoff, Lhevinne, and Scriabin? All classmates, all graduated at the same time. And they all got gold medals.
Oh, yeah, they did. They did.
And Lhevinne got a standing ovation.
Standing ovation?
From the jury.
Exactly.
Not sure. Probably, I don't know if Rachmaninoff did, but definitely that's part of the famous thing. I mean, when the Moscow Conservatory piano faculty stands up in unison and claps for you.
Yeah, it's only happened one other time. Horowitz.
Really?
When he performed, when he performed that Don Giovanni Fantasy by Liszt.
That's right.
Yeah, he said that the whole place was pandemonium, and he says he recalls that from that day on he became known as the crazy pianist. So I thought that was funny. But anyways, so he wins the gold medal, and he meets and marries Rosina in 1898.
They got married though in Europe, not in Russia, right?
Yeah, I believe so.
I think so.
Yeah. Now, according to Wikipedia, they, due to circumstances, anti-Semitism, and political turmoil, they moved to Berlin, and that was in 1907.
You know, that's interesting. There's a period of time when I was reading about Anton Rubinstein, because I wanted to see how his life and Rubinstein's overlapped.
Yeah.
Rubinstein went back and forth several times. He was the founder of the Russian Music Society or Federation or something, which became the St. Petersburg Conservatory, and they became the director of it.
Yeah.
And he ran it for some time. I mean, really did some great work, but there came a period where there was a movement to decide to give the medals based upon ethnicity and not merit.
Yeah.
And he understood that to mean they don't want to give them to the Jewish students. Rubinstein was Jewish, of course. Yeah. And he was, so I told him. And he left. And that's when he went on a 4-year tour or something like that of Europe. Went to the United States, made a passel of money.
Yeah.
But, this kind of thing was going on. I think it's always been true in European history forever. Yeah. You need to have a scapegoat. Yeah. Interesting, the whole concept of scapegoat goes back to biblical times. The people would place all the sins of the community on the goat and then chase it out of the village. Yeah. So it would go out and die in the desert or something. Wow. Well, Jews were convenient scapegoats all the time in Western civilization. Yeah. And things were not going well, as any of you guys know your history, in the early 20th century with Russian Tsar and his family and various things. And there were 2 revolutions, and they got out before the first one. And they went to Berlin. Yeah. So,
anyways, in Berlin, so they apparently they performed duets and 2 piano works quite a bit.
Did a lot of teaching.
And lots of teaching, and at least up until the time of the outbreak of World War I, and they wound up trapped in Berlin for a number of years. Yeah, they were declared enemies of the state. Yeah. So, anyways,
4 years they were forced to be there. They weren't allowed to travel.
Exactly. And they lost everything. Yeah. They lost everything.
Well, because eventually then after the First World War was over, the Second Revolution had already happened, and the Soviets had taken everything into the state. So they were only getting by very meagerly.
Yeah. They said they were teaching.
Just teaching, But then,
in 1919, changed everything. They came to New York. And they, the rest of the story is basically, success history here.
Well, he was performing a lot, and they were both teaching in New York. Obviously, these were hugely gifted, immensely gifted people. And even in a city, even at the time of New York, which, before the First World War, it had Gustav Mahler there as the conductor of the New York Philharmonic and did work at the Metropolitan Opera. Even with how spoiled New York can be with the riches of talents that it has, it must have recognized something there. Because in a previous show that we did, I showed kind of the history of how Juilliard got started. But it's named after the fellow that gave him the money to add to an academy that was already there. And Juilliard was actually the graduate level school at the time. Yeah. Now it takes in undergrads as well. Yeah. But at the time it was considered graduate level. And the Lhevinnes were both hired with the founding of the school in 1924 with Olga Samarov. Who, despite her name, Frida Hickenlooper or whatever it was,
Lucy,
was a good old girl from Texas.
Yeah.
But the woman could play just as well as anybody.
Yeah.
They were all founding members of the original school. Yeah, I read a little bit more about him. He didn't do a lot of recording. Famously, for look, this guy was a pianist's pianist. I mean, even Horowitz said, "I'd kill for his octaves."
Oh yeah, no kidding.
And that's Horowitz says that.
Yeah.
He didn't do a lot of recording, and he performed, but not a ton. But he did get around. He basically split up the year doing some traveling within the States. I don't know that he left the States after that, but and teaching. And they actually said that he really liked teaching.
Yeah, more than he did performing.
And the list of students in the Wikipedia article of people who studied with him. I didn't know that Byron Janis did it. Yeah. Of course, I know about Adele Marcus because there's a funny story about that when Adele Marcus was one of the great next generation teachers of lots of pianists. And she talks about she was studying with Mr. Lhevinne, and then when he went on tour for a while, she studied with Mrs. Lhevinne.
Yeah.
And she was, practicing her music and everything. And then when he came back, she came back to have a lesson with Mr. Lhevinne, and she played the music. And he listened to her and he said, "What fool told you to play it like that?"
Yeah.
And she stuttered a little bit. She said, "Well, Mrs. Lhevinne." And he said, "Oh, well, by all means, then you should play it that way." Covered his tracks right away, but it still got written in a book.
Yes, it's still got for posterity's sake.
Well, I was stunned by all the people that studied with him. A number of well-known names.
Oh, yeah.
Sasha Gorodnitsky. Of course, Rusachinska studied with everybody.
Oh, yeah.
But Del Marcus and Byron Janis.
Byron Janis, that's the biggie there.
Did he find his way there by way of Horowitz, or did he study with Horowitz afterwards?
He studied with Horowitz afterwards.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was, I think he was about 18 when he finally played for Horowitz.
Yeah.
And that was an interesting relationship.
He was the only student, right?
No, he's had others. He had Ivan Davis.
Really?
He had Sergio Fiorentino,
Really?
another one. Oh yeah, he was one of them. And several others. There's a few others.
Did he do most of that teaching when he was retired?
Yeah, when he was retired.
50s through the mid-60s.
Yes, but even later than that, in the 80s, he took on an Indonesian student named Eduardus Halim, Halim. And later than that, he was watching the Van Cliburn competition. I believe it was 1989, 89 competition, and it was the first competition ever where they completely did away with all the repertoire requirements. So anything goes.
Really?
Yeah.
Is that still the case?
Nope, it is no longer the case.
Yeah.
No, so they installed some more of the requirements. But back then, they lifted all repertoire requirements, almost anything goes, and that was the year that Frederick Shue came in with that complete, repertoire of just transcriptions. And so, but he wasn't the only one there. There was one young Russian named Valery Kuleshov, who was the silver medalist in this competition, and he would be the first ever in the competition to ever perform the Carmen Variations
of
Horowitz's.
And that got his attention?
And that got everybody's attention. And what a performance that was. If you ever get a chance to find Valery Kuleshov's performance of this work, which is a brilliant work to begin with.
Yeah.
But in the way Kuleshov does it, it was worth all the accolades that he got from that performance. Everybody went nuts.
Yeah.
Okay? Everybody went nuts. I mean, every concert pianist that aspires to have a world accolades would have died for this one performance that he did with the Van Cliburn competition. There was stomping, there was screaming when he did it. It was, I mean, I saw it.
Who won the gold medal?
The gold medal was won by one Italian, Simone Pedroni from Italy.
I've heard of that name.
Yeah, he is now he's back in Italy.
A professor.
He not only performs the piano, but he also conducts an orchestra as well.
Oh.
So he's a conductor. I think
Frederick Schuh was eliminated.
Frederick Schuh was eliminated. I think it was after the second round.
I bought a while back, and I think I talked about it. I don't know if we ever talked about it in the shows.
Yeah.
But the complete Prokofiev sonatas.
Yeah, the complete.
And it's really quite impressive.
Yes, it's very impressive. Apparently,
His work.
Prokofiev is very close to his heart. He's recorded all of the Prokofiev violin sonatas as well.
Really
So he has done
interesting guy. He runs a kind of a Buddhist piano school in France.
Yep.
You guys have to come and live like monks with him.
Yeah.
And they milk the cows and the goats.
Yep,
and
they
stuff,
do, and they
go
plant their
fishing. They
vegetables.
plant their vegetables. They eat their own food that they make.
Yeah.
Meditate and all this stuff, and they have to practice rather than play.
Actually, practice.
Yeah. My teacher Ellsworth, he had a little hand crocheted thing on the student piano.
Yeah.
Made by the mother of some student of his.
Uh-huh.
Think 10 times, play once. That was one of the things Ellsworth had.
Really? Think 10 times.
Yeah,
play
conceptualize considerably. What are you going to do? Plan it out, this and that. What's it going to take and everything, and then try it. So that I think basically what he's saying, don't let things happen because of happenstance.
Yeah.
Or accidental. It's a waste of time. It's kind of stupid.
Yeah.
Misuse of your time and your energy.
Yeah.
Mechanism. I would suggest think 10 times, check with your teacher, and then play it.
Yeah.
Just in case. Anyway.
Okay.
You
Anyway,
wanna jump in, or got more to do about it?
Well, let me see. What were we talking? We were talking about the band. Oh yeah, you were asking about the Horowitz pupils.
Oh yeah.
Well, Vladimir Horowitz actually saw that competition and was very intrigued with Kuleshov's playing. That he asked, he says, would you like to play for me sometime? He says, I would like to hear some more of your playing. And he says, I could make arrangements with the Russian consulate to have you come over. And sure enough, arrangements were made for him to fly from Russia to come to New York to study with Horowitz. And just as he was getting on the plane, an officer came by and handed him a letter and said, "You're not going anywhere."
Oh.
He opened up the letter and found out that Horowitz had passed away.
Oh,
It
no!
was that year.
Oh.
So he didn't get to
What a
go.
loss.
So, yeah.
Poor guy.
Yeah. But
But the fact that he just got an invitation from Horowitz
Oh,
to
yeah.
play for him, and then Horowitz liked the performance of his own composition. That's something you could always write on your resume.
Oh, yeah. There's more. There's more. He also got an invitation from Earl Wild.
No way.
Yeah, he did. As a matter of fact, in his memoirs, there's a certain section in the book where they have photographs of some of the famous people and other pianists, and his picture's right there. So he's in there.
Let me get a little bit more. You guys probably know who we're talking about, but Earl Wild, well, he's kind of closer to the heart here in Ohio because he finished up his teaching career more or less in his lifetime at Ohio State. He was the big star on the faculty.
Yeah, the big kahuna.
I could have studied with him, but they weren't saying who it was going to be because legally they couldn't make it public until everything got done. And I was going to do... I think this did it for my doctorate because I'd already... No, this was back when I went to study with Howard, with Howard Karp at Madison. And I'd been accepted at Ohio State, and they said, we got a really huge person coming. Unfortunately, we can't tell you who that would be, but we can guarantee that you would be in his studio. Yeah. And I just... and anyway, I don't regret what I did. I had a great time in Madison. It was some of the best musical learning and experiences and everything in my whole life. But Earl Wild, just briefly, was basically America's own Horowitz-type pianist. He wasn't as wild as Horowitz. I think his playing had a lot more finesse and control, but he could raise the shackles on the back of your neck, and
Oh yeah.
and I mean some of the fireworks and things that he could play, but he did it in the old school way, like some of those other guys.
Yeah.
He maintained his poise, and you just would hear this stuff going. It's like when they used to say when Hensel, was it Hensel, or who was the guy that played with the thumbs?
Oh, Talbert.
Talbert, when he
Talbert.
used to play back in those days.
Yeah.
Everybody would crane their necks to see, how does he do that? Because he's got stuff going like
Oh,
this
yeah.
and this, and there's this melody going on in the
Mhm.
middle of the piano. Well, that was big time stuff back in those days. Well, my teacher, Ellsworth, went a couple of times to New York for other reasons, but both times he knew that Earl Wright was performing at Carnegie Hall,
Yeah.
and he went.
Mhm.
And he talked about him playing some of his Gershwin song transcriptions.
Oh yeah.
And he said they're just so insanely difficult and ludicrously humorous. You know, he just said the audience was just laughing out loud at times when he was playing stuff because there's all these voices and things happening. It's like, you got to have at least another hand with another 5 fingers to do this. And yet he's up there and just he was a very elegant man at the keyboard. You know, very quiet, very poised and everything.
Yeah.
But that was our American-born Horowitz.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy was hand-selected by Arturo Toscanini to be in his hand-selected NBC Symphony Orchestra. And then through that, as a young man, he ended up working for NBC actually for a number of years, in television and stuff like that. And that's where he made major bucks.
Yeah.
For a long time, he was a composer, arranger, pianist,
transcriber,
conductor,
radio,
stuff.
the whole thing,
whatever they needed. And he still, performed and stuff. But at some point, he left that, and then he kind of, really impressively, at an age when other guys would have been starting to sit on their laurels, he went back out in the public eye and started to play and make a name for himself as a serious concert artist.
Yeah.
He had a little. Initially, I think there was a little bit of pushback against him because he'd been a TV and radio guy.
Oh yeah.
What are these people now? He's coming out with this. Okay, well we'll go. He's going to play. Oh, he's going to play Beethoven. Oh, he's going to play Liszt. Oh, all right. We'll go. We'll see it. Then they heard him play.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, the boy can certainly play.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And off he went for decades.
Yeah, there was an interesting story in that memoirs where he was asked to play with the Boston Pops, and the conductor was Arthur Fiedler at the time. And so he approaches Arthur Fiedler, who's sitting behind his desk, scribbling away, and he's being introduced. He says, "Maestro, this is Earl Wild." He says, "He's going to be your soloist next weekend." And he was like, "Yeah?" He says, and the first question out of his mouth, "Can you play in rhythm?" Was his question. And sure enough, he can.
Yeah.
So, and more. Yeah. So anyway, shall we jump into this?
Okay.
Let's do this.
So this is not a big book.
No, it is not a big book.
But I would say it's like a little book of wisdom. Like, if you took, like these things, they're like, if you got the highlights from some really wise sayings in the Bible, the New Testament, or, famous writers or something like that. And it basically pulls down the essence about the way you would think optimally about a certain kind of field or subject. You don't want to master physics and all that and have to read all of Einstein and all those guys before. You just get certain quotes here which tries to make you aware of the world of nuclear physics and relativity and quantum mechanics and things so that you can understand it. It's basically, this is not a how-to. This is not step-by-step.
Right.
The book, I'm not sure what it's called, between Gieseking and his teacher Carl Leimer.
Oh, that
remember what that title is?
I don't
It's
remember.
over there on
It's
the
up there.
shelf.
You want to look for it?
Yeah, real quick if you want.
Be right back.
That book, Gieseking, was a incredible pianist that maybe people don't know so well. It's over here next to the Maurice Henson stuff there on the second shelf. I think it's bluish.
Yes, it is.
Yeah?
What a beautiful book.
Gieseking was a German, and he was a student, well, of this Karl Leimer, but then most famously of the Swiss pianist for a while. It was,
Gans?
no. Edward.
Bart?
No, it starts with an S. His last name was E.S. He was a rather famous, important Swiss pianist. But he was Gieseking's kind of big-time teacher. Gieseking was like amazing. Like when he was 15 years old, at the same time that Olga Samarov was hitting on 40 or so.
Yeah.
And interestingly, we talked about this last time. Well, I don't know if we did. Did we talk about her in the show itself?
Which one?
Samarov?
Oh, yeah, we did. I brought in that recording.
She was the second historic pianist to play all the 32 Beethovens. First it was Hans von Bülow, and she was doing it more than a decade, or a decade and a half before Arthur Schnabel. At the same time in Germany, a 15-year-old pianist named Walter Gieseking played all 32 Beethovens.
This guy.
There it is, Piano Technique. So that book is a little thicker, and it's a little bit more specific with music examples and such, and explaining things in a little bit more of an anatomically detailed way of how to do things. I'd highly recommend you listen to any of this guy's playing, Walter Gieseking, but one of the stuff that made my jaw drop. He, as a German pianist, he was very famous for playing French music.
Yes. Yeah.
There are recordings of the complete Ravel repertoire, which is really quite exciting, and Debussy. And I have to say, the Debussy studio recording, some of the stuff he did, you know, oftentimes what they said Gieseking did, which is interesting because it's true. When you're in a studio, you have the engineer there and all that.
Yeah.
You play for perfection.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and
absolutely.
if you can't do it, the engineer can make it happen, more or less. Especially in this day and age.
Oh, yeah.
Gieseking takes great risks.
Oh, absolutely.
You don't understand, this is back in the day where you're cutting a wax cylinder, probably.
Yeah.
And then you screwed it up and you had to do it again or something like that. It wasn't until after the Second World War that they had magnetic tape, and you could splice, which was the great invention for Glenn Gould.
Oh, yeah.
Mr. Splice. But, and what is it, the Les Joyeux, right?
Yeah, Leo.
Of Debussy.
Yeah.
It's one of the most breathtaking and hair-raising performances I've ever heard, and by this German pianist of Debussy's music. Really quite something. We'll get, of course, with me a little bit off.
That's all right.
Off sides there, but this is a master pianist in a great tradition going all the way back to Anton Rubinstein, who was a mentor of his, and he knew a lot about him. I think Lhevinne was born when?
1874.
Yeah, so
year after Rachmaninoff.
So Anton Rubinstein lived another 23 years. Well, he was 23 years old when Rubinstein died, so he had a chance to really hear the guy and kind of continue the tradition. And he makes some specific references to him in here. The book begins, and we go skip past the forward, but I just have a few things underlined, and you can also comment.
Sure.
The very first thing he talks about, I think these are very common sense things that might not seem to be common sense to a beginning student or a new person. On page 3, indifference to rests.
Oh, God.
And he quotes Mozart, silence is the greatest effect in music.
Yes.
He's saying, and then Mozart is also, I saw a different quote or something like it, but where Mozart was also in a correspondence was said to have written, of all the notes that I've ever written, I think the most dramatic moments in my music are the rests. And I have to confess sometimes my excitement and enthusiasm about playing. I was listening to some recordings of mine actually last night. There's a few times when I was listening, I think, oh, I should have waited just a little bit longer.
Yeah.
Not that I wasn't doing it correctly.
Yeah.
But the moment could have allowed for just a little bit more air before it moved on.
Yeah.
Just a little bit. And I think what he's talking about here is you have to develop a sense of appreciation for when intentional sound is not happening.
Yes.
Versus when you make it happen. And that it's a combination of those two things which creates tension.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. So he gives an example of the Chopin Nocturne Opus 48, number 1.
Yes, he does.
Let's see, another thing that I have outlined is, well, some good things. He's starting to talk a little bit about developing the ear a little bit. He says, think about the way, and I do this a lot now when I play,
Yeah.
think about the way the melody might be played by an oboe.
Yes.
Or a French horn.
Or a violin.
Yeah, or a
Says as
violin.
well.
And then for that matter, or a singer.
Yes.
Because that would affect very much the way you play it. Then he goes through something kind of interesting. You might want to show this to them.
I will.
Where he's showing the duration of a whole note and then it being cut up like an egg, sliced.
Yes.
And in terms of shorter articulations of a note. So staccato, détaché, things like that.
Yes, and portamento.
And this has to do with this concept of playing with silence and sound. So he's showing the differences with music symbols and how these things play out. The next thing that he talks about in the kind of introductory material is about developing a sense of rhythm, hearing rhythm. Now he's writing this in the early 20th century in America, where jazz has been going on for a while. We had ragtime, we had Scott Joplin in the later 19th century, in the early 20th century, but rock and roll hasn't happened yet.
No, not yet.
And I would say the music options in 1924 in the United States were European classical, Edward McDowell type American music, because we really hadn't sent a lot of people over to Nelly Boulanger and developed a Roy Harris or Aaron Copland kind of American sound yet. If you lived down in the South and could sneak in, wouldn't be a problem. The white people didn't know.
Yeah.
Or if you lived in some big cities in the North, you'd hear black musicians playing jazz. There'd probably be very little reason for you to go to a black gospel church back in those days as a white person or a European. So, I mean, it was pretty limited.
Yeah.
And now what he's getting, I mean, in this day and age, God, even just the internet, you don't have to go anywhere to know. But when you think about Cuban music, I think especially, very rhythmically interesting.
Oh, yeah.
But then all of the music that we talk about from Cuba and Central America and in there, that all comes from Africa originally. And now there's amazing international African artists and all this. In this day and age, I think it's possible that the typical American can become attuned really to very sophisticated rhythmic music making. If you really listen to it, you get accompanied to it. And a lot of people are dancing the things now. So, and people, is it rumba comes from Brazil, I think.
Yeah.
The samba, the rumba. I'm not sure what the Cubans call
Mambo, Cuba.
Yeah, Mambo's Cuban.
Yep.
All these different things. And then, of course, now they're interwedded. All
they
these
are.
different musics is so mixed up. But back in his day, he had some good advice.
Yeah.
And he said something interesting. He says,
to develop rhythm, if you're trying to develop rhythm, he says, find someone, a duet, to play duets with, or a singer, or a mature instrumentalist that you can accompany so that you can understand rhythm, its flexibility. Also, he talks about the march. Here he talks about a student who came into the studio to play Schubert's March Militaire for solo piano. And he said that rhythmically he had the basic rhythm, but he said that he couldn't help but listen to it, and it sounded more like march of wooden soldiers instead of live ones.
Yeah.
So he makes a difference between about rhythm being rigid, but at the same time, it should be more. The rhythm should be more alive.
And
So
he himself was born south of Moscow,
yeah.
but the Eastern Slavs and such, and the Russians have so many different people. It says because the Bohemians, Hungarians, Spanish, Polish, Russians seem to possess rhythm instinctively, is not so much a matter of heredity as that they've heard this rhythmic music from baby their whole lives.
Yes.
Nowadays, as I said, I think that this is not so problematic for us Americans as it would have been back in the time. But another thing I think, play with them. The other thing I found very interesting, when I took a Baroque music class with Trudy Faber, who studied with Gustav Leonhardt, she was a great teacher, really interesting lady. She brought in a woman whose husband taught on the English faculty, and she was on the dance faculty, who came in and taught us all the historical dances from what it would have been the Baroque period. So we learned how to do a bourrée, and we learned how to do, I can't think of all the different minuet and all these different things, a polonaise, the dances that would have gone with these things, especially like in the suites that Bach wrote, for example. And I actually used that experience when I was teaching. The first year that I was at Cyprus at the university, I was actually hired to supervise the chamber music and accompanying program and the working with singers and stuff like that. Second year, they actually hired me to be on the piano faculty because they discovered what I could really do. But the other 2 or 3 piano professors there invited me to participate in the master classes they gave every week. It was really cool. They had their own class that they would do, and then they would also meet together as a whole and have all the piano students together and do a master class. And there was one, Shefkat. She eventually became my student over the years. She was playing a Haydn minuet from a sonata. I think she was Omri's student at the time. And, she was a smart girl and hard-working girl and everything and such, and relatively musical, I'd say. But something wasn't clicking. Well, the other guys kind of talked about, well, what about the fingering, about this and that, and everything. Every teacher got a chance to suggest some things. I said to her, when it came to me, my turn, I said, Shefkat, I said, do you know what a minuet is? And she gave me a little encyclopedic, understand. I said, no, I mean, but do you know how to dance a minuet? Do you know how it feels? She looked at me kind of strangely. No. I said, so you don't know how to dance a minuet? No. Would you like to? Well, sure. So I got her up off the bench, and I said, everybody else here in the room, grab a partner. So there's 2 of you. And I said, and this is how you dance minuet. So I had her hand up in the air and showed them how to step it and dance it. Even the 2 piano professors, they
got this get up. Wow.
And we went around the room and got the feeling of the minuet. And I said, okay, all right, so that's pretty good. And they were laughing, people were having fun, kind of trying it out. And I said, well, let's try something now. Why don't you try to play this piece again? And I said, just remember how it feels, okay?
Yeah.
Now play the music. And it was very interesting because it was a lot better.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure it was.
Regardless of fingering inches or whatever somebody else might have thought. But no, I thought the real problem here is the spirit isn't there and the lilt isn't there because she doesn't know how it feels. How it goes,
exactly.
Yeah. And my 2 colleagues, they were very nice to me. They kind. It's true. Too. Yeah. Over time, they said, "Man, you have this ability to just boom, zero in on the real problem, like what the foundation is." Yeah. Well, that's because I had good students and I worked hard and stuff like that. No, I think this is another thing. These are things that he talks about that you can start working on this stuff
Yeah.
before you are anywhere close to developing and mastering it.
Yeah.
And they're necessary. He points these things out as you go on.
Now, my first eye-catching moment here was the section that said indifference to rests, which you talked about earlier.
Yeah.
I like the sentence where he says, "Music is painted upon a canvas of silence." It was just before the one you cited, and how so true that is. I remember years ago reading in a magazine article. I believe it might have been a clavier magazine. Some of you who don't know what that magazine is, I don't even know that it's still in print. But I remember reading that music, when you perform a piano work, it doesn't begin on the first note. The music actually begins before the first note. Music doesn't end on the last note or the last beat. It ends after that, after the double bar at the end. I always thought that was quite enlightening.
I've seen some performances where the conductor will come up on stage, but this is usually when it's going to be a big work, like Carmina Burana or Mahler or something like that. And there'll be a moment on the podium, a little bit longer than one would anticipate for a lot of music. But then the really amazing thing is when it's done. And I've seen performances where it's absolute silence afterwards.
Yeah.
Because the vibrations, the spirit, and the stuff is still present.
Yeah.
It's silent.
Yeah.
But it's not empty.
No.
Frankly, it's like being in a house where there are ghosts or it's haunted.
Yeah.
You know that you're not alone in that house. You just know it.
Yeah.
You feel it. You feel some kind of a presence or something there. The house is not empty. It may look that way, but it doesn't feel that way. And this is something that you get accustomed to as a musician. This is the whole thing of becoming a bit of a wizard.
Yeah.
Playing with magic and things like that. Playing with the unseen. One of the things I know I mentioned the last, or before anyway.
Yeah.
Practicing for me, it always amazes me. Because when I'm really kind of in a role, and I've been practicing for, continuously for a period of time. And then, I would say maximally, never ever more than 4 hours at one sitting. And usually 3 is pretty good.
Yeah.
Because anyway, since I hurt my back years ago, it's a little hard for me to do more than maybe 3 on the bench. And I get a little stiff. But the interesting thing is, while I'm practicing and working, I have no sense of passing of time.
Exactly.
And oftentimes when I've been really working on some complicated, problem solving in the music, and so you're both solving and working and then experiencing the sound and everything. The perception of the time is it's been a shorter period of time when I stop. But in fact, it's truly been a longer period of time. You just, it's a pleasant thing in a way. It captures you in so much of a way, you don't feel the passage of time.
No, you don't.
That's really wonderful, like that. Yeah. The next, are we okay to the next chapter?
I also wanted to mention another part here. The part about how he cites the Chopin Nocturne, C minor, Opus 48, number 7.
Yeah. Number 1.
Oh, number 1, yeah, number 1. And he talks about how, well, I don't see it now, but he talks about how we play with so much feeling about the notes. He also says, don't just feel the notes, but feel the rests.
Yeah.
So even rests has to have a certain feeling as much as the notes do. I always thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Now that where he talks about the different staccatos for the long notes. Remember that the title says basic principles. At the end of that section, he does say that, what does he say? The touch, let's see, blah, 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 blah. These conceptions are general and must not be taken too literally. That's what he says at the end of the section.
Those, I think, is advice for more advanced people.
Yeah.
I mean, the interesting thing about this stuff is that it applies both
Yeah.
in terms of elementary study, but also very advanced study, and even
absolutely.
master musicianship. They're concepts that exist, but I think it's important what he's suggesting here, which is interesting because it shows what a master he is. These things are applicable both for beginners and for enormously advanced, to be honest, as well.
Okay.
But if you're missing out on certain things, then these things you need to know.
Under the section, developing rhythm, third paragraph, he says, duet playing in developing rhythm. Duet playing with a strong, vigorous musical individual is one of the best ways in which to catch rhythm, as one might catch the measles. Rhythm is infectious.
Mm-hmm.
Infectious? Infectious, yeah. A Strauss waltz under the baton of the Waltz King, or a Sousa march under the baton of the March King, never failed to sway thousands. So,
I think when you make music with another person, you have to listen.
Absolutely.
And you have to feel things in a way that you don't as a soloist. It's very interesting. When in my second year of my doctorate, I've been thinking about it for a while. It was a bit of a philosophical decision, but also one where I wanted to do what I really loved. Mm-hmm. My teacher, Spillman, was the director of the opera program and a great collaborative pianist. Played solo great too, actually. Sometimes I heard some memorable performances from him. But I went into him and I said, I think I want to change my focus from solo to accompanying in chamber music. Mm. Because I said, Mr. Spillman, honestly, I said, I'm fine being up there taking the stage and holding the fort, and presenting my thoughts and my ideas on things. But I said, where I really get a charge is being out there on stage with other really great musicians and doing things together where there's that potential for doing something unexpected in the moment. Yeah. I had that experience with a Spanish violinist in Madison. He played my chamber music, and I played a couple of his recitals with him. And he was that kind of musician.
He was.
Just try something, and if you're really working with it, it's almost like jazz.
Yeah, it sure is.
Just do the same thing with him. He was creating new music on stuff we practiced in the performance.
Yeah.
I love that. But his name was Mahuat. Guillet, I think. Mahuat Guillet.
Be sure to post it.
But when you're doing forehand, this is why it's good if you're working with a young student, you're the teacher and stuff, you get them to play with you.
Yeah.
You're playing with them just because it takes them out of themselves.
Yeah.
And they can begin to truly, let's just say, isn't that what life is kind of about?
Yeah.
You have to get out of your own head and out of your own heart. At some point, that's what it means, to grow out of a innocent child way of looking at the world where everything is centered on you, looking out into it. But we need objectivity in order to see things in a bigger and perhaps a less directly emotional way. But it's a step, because ultimately you want to bring your full emotional consciousness into the music making, and it's an amalgam of both the purely creative and then subjective versus the objective and almost the rational or scientific way of looking at things. And to be a really great musician means ultimately you've wedded all those things together So you have something to say, something to share that may really affect the other person. But you have to go through these stages to do it. And as you can imagine, it doesn't happen fast.
Yeah.
You know, this is a serious art form we're talking about.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
Chapter 2?
Right there. Yeah. Yeah, the things that he says at the beginning, I don't think that much about screwing with the scales that much, like he says. But what I do appreciate, what she talks about with practicing knowing your scales, he says something that, I mean, to those of us who've been playing this repertoire now, it's kind of yeah, that makes sense. But he said most people look upon scales as a kind of, this is on page 11, as a kind of musical gymnasium for developing muscles. They do that, of course, and there are a few technical exercises that are as good as scales for this. But their great practical value is for training the hand in fingering, so that the best fingering in any key becomes automatic. Anybody will tell you that an important part of preparing new repertoire and getting going with it. And I must say, I had a certain kind of natural and perhaps willful way. Well, when I studied with Robert Witt, at the age of 14, I went down to the university, began taking lessons with the professor as the chair of the department. He had been a student of Albert Serko, who was a student of Schnabel, and they were all to some extent of this idea that, well, Schnabel used to say, all of the difficulties in playing the piano lie within the 32 Beethoven piano sonatas. If you can play anything from the 32 Beethoven piano sonatas, you can play the piano, period. I don't agree with that. There are some enormous problems in Beethoven, but Liszt added some new things.
Oh, yeah.
And I would think even Mr. Liszt himself would be astonished at the acrobatics of somebody like Schifra, Georgi Schifra, maybe Horowitz.
Oh, yeah.
The rubber-like easy way that Yu Jiawen could do anything.
Yeah.
You know. And then perhaps the heightened poetic control of Ignaz Friedman and Yuan Lin. I mean, just extraordinary technique and pianism, you know. But and I think I talked about this last show, which I would say. I think this is important because I write fingerings in my music.
Yeah.
And I have been doing it for years now. And I think it's important and it helps. Sometimes I change my mind, but I always write in pencil so I can erase it and change it if I want to. If something else wants to force its way through. But I would say my fingerings are usually based upon a natural feeling for the structure of the human hand, the 5 fingers, the position, and the natural way that they lay on the keyboard in any particular area.
Yeah.
So one thing I remember talking about, I'm not a big fan of the Henley editions where it's Hans Theopold somebody, Mark or something like that. I learned that early on, I don't know that they still do it this way, but the Henley edition when it came out was highly regarded and respected because it was almost the closest thing to manuscript that you could get.
Yes.
Very, very carefully researched and laid out, beautifully printed. And the publisher, Henley, asked his piano teacher to be the editor for a lot of the stuff at the beginning. And it's interesting, it's not a thing that I would say is wrong, but I understand the approach is different. His fingering sometimes was emphasizing fingered hand legato on the piano, or to keep a line from being broken. In which case, sometimes I find some of the passages extraordinarily awkward.
Yeah.
But I also think that's going to depend upon your hand. Look at this thing. My teacher, Howard Karp, said I have a great hand because I've got a big square palm with a lot of power behind the fingers. The fingers are not fat, but they're very strong, and I have a lot of flesh on the end of the fingers. I'm a very muscular kind of pianist, a lot of power and good bones. I mean, if all this disappeared, my family has very thick bones. I have played sports in my life and never had anything worse than a hairline fracture.
Wow.
And I played contact sports. So we were pretty strongly built people. Howard was giant. He was like 6'3", 6'4", very tall from the waist up, had orangutan arms with narrower but longer palm and a very long thumb. His thumb almost came out to where his index finger was, almost, at least 3/4 of the way. But he always said I had a really good a hand for it, and they talk about this in here. But so with the legato fingering that they do in the handle, I don't think I'm off bounds there because I do agree with it. I think that the scale, because I agree in a different way.
Yeah.
But I think it depends on if you're going to do something like where you carry the fourth finger over.
Yeah.
Well, that might work for somebody with Howard's hand, longer fingers.
Yeah.
But for me, it's just like, I don't know, at your height and different people's height, like if you try to climb over a fence out here in the farm,
Yeah.
you step up on the first one and toss yourself over, or you actually got enough space and your legs are long enough, tall enough, you just throw your leg over the top one and just hoist yourself over.
Use your hands and just sort of leapfrog over the thing.
And why did we do that?
Yeah,
well, protect the jewels, right?
Yeah, exactly.
For the guys, and it all depends on how long your legs are.
Yeah.
And then maybe how certain things hang in there. Maybe it's a little farther down the other bit. I don't know. But what I find that I do, and I like what he says about this, like when I played the Beethoven C minor piano concerto.
Yeah.
That was great. Because what he's also saying, and this is true, when you think about most music, and if we finger it in the 19th century way from Bach's time, they didn't use their thumbs all the time.
No, they didn't.
But well, it's rather amazing to consider. I mean, because Bach could get pretty damn complicated.
Oh yeah, it can.
And that they would have done it with 1, 2, 3, 4, with a little plus sometimes as need to be. But also suggests something interesting how they would have played it.
Yeah.
It would have had to have been different. But anyway, let's say fingering from Bach's time all the way into the 20th century. Scales, arpeggios, chords, all built around keys, right?
Yeah.
If you know your scales and the way, and part of what he's talking about is the sensuous, the kind of way that E major feels, or B major feels, or G flat major feels, or C minor, C harmonic minor, for example. The way that all kind of feels on there. If you really know where the fingers belong in those things, when you get into a passage where the harmony is probably something clear like that, your hand kind of gravitates towards that kind of thing. And then what is the damper pedal for? Now, very fine piano playing is relatively free of the damper pedal.
Yeah.
What we would call legato, which is a magic trick on a percussion instrument like the piano anyway. But where we make it seem like a singing instrument is we create an effect of legato. And then where the things don't physically hook up, you just throw a teeny bit of pedal in there, lift the damper, and give it a little singing sustenance so that you can move to the next section, the next thing like that. And you create that sense. It shouldn't be drowning in water. That's way too much right foot. But the fingers are mostly responsible for that. But I find that my paw moves, across the landscape in different ways. And the wrist, of course, is adjusting horizontally, to accommodate certain things. And I think it's very important. And I'm an old-fashioned piano teacher. I don't have too many students. This is one a year. Although he doesn't come see me so much anymore. We see each other every week at Gap. Yeah, we do. But I know I'm jabbering a lot here.
Oh, that's all right.
But well, what we do and what we're talking about, what we're passionate about, what this show is all about, and everything, is a passion for a great classic art form, or even one might even say a great mental and physical and spiritual discipline.
Mhm.
And if you think of the classical things like karate, what is it that you studied in the Philippines? Martial art.
Martial arts?
Yeah, you do it.
No, well, I don't do it. Well, if you're talking about the Filipino martial arts, you're talking about my brother.
Yeah, but you know how to do stuff because you had a
I took
circumstance where you
karate lessons.
used it.
Yeah,
So
Japanese.
when you think about it like that with Japanese stuff, or the taekwondo, or jiu-jitsu, or all those kind of things, you think about the discipline where you're going in at least 3 times a week as a kid
Yeah,
to just repeat,
Yeah.
do them over, get thrown, throw,
yeah,
hit the mat, and do it over and over and over. The repetition and the perfection of all of that. I don't know anything about it from my own personal experience, but I understand fencing is a similar kind of thing. You really have to know the forms and all that. And when it comes to being judged on it, their points are 4 very clear examples of the form that you use in your posture and all that. All these great classic, what would you call them? Martial arts, but there are other kinds of arts.
Yeah.
And one might say that the whole point of art, and a word that's connected with that, is artifice.
Mhm.
Artifice, or artificial, means that it's not natural. So I suppose when we learn how to walk, we learn how to talk, we learn how to do certain kinds of things, one might say there's a natural kind of way of doing it. I was thinking okay, anybody can probably, to some extent, learn how to hold a baseball bat and swing it, hit a baseball. Yeah. But if you're going to be Hank Aaron, or Lou Gehrig, or Babe Ruth, or Pete Rose, there's a science and an art that you have to master. That's why you go to baseball practice. And if you're lucky, you got really good coaches that teach you about your posture and show you things like that. It's true in football. When you're playing sports, there's so much that we do. Now, when we as amateurs look at it or do it, we just look at the fun and all this and that.
Yeah.
But the ones who do it, which get paid the big money and make us drop our beer and the food on the floor, those guys have really put in the time.
Absolutely.
And the same thing is true for you and John Lim, the guy who won the Van Clymer competition. A classic art form, whether you want to become the next tennis ace, or golf, or someday another Roger. You and the guys would know who Roger Staubach was. That guy could throw a bomb. That football would go way up in the football stadium and end up in the end zone for somebody to catch. Guy had a cannon for an arm. I know there's new guys that do too, but Johnny Unitas was something too. This is my age. My point is, anything that requires that kind of control, specialization, grace, requires a marriage of the mind and the body in discipline together. And I would say even when I got to see Michael Jordan play basketball the last year, I hadn't followed things much, but I was in Japan, and the Bulls were going to go to win the world title at the end of the season, and it was big broadcast stuff. It was the last year that Jerry, what's his name, the coach, I think it was, and all the players were together. They all totally disbanded. Everybody retired. None of them stayed. They were just done. They decided that was a team effort, and that was it. Watch Michael Jordan. It's like watching Baryshnikov.
Exactly.
I mean, there'd be these giant people, like trees, in
Yeah.
the Lord of the Rings stuff.
Yeah.
And he was like, in comparison, he's not a short guy, but like a hobbit
Yeah.
in a way.
Yeah.
And he would like be down there halfway around the trees, bending down.
Yeah.
Stuff just like going around the trees, and the next thing, poof! He's up in there above the trees and slams them all into the net, you know. That was beautiful.
Oh yeah, it was.
That was beautiful watching Michael Jordan go to that basket. Just as it was beautiful to watch Baryshnikov just sail across the stage. The little guy.
Yep.
You know, but my God, it looked like he'd get up there on the high wire and go flying across the stage without any help. All that takes time. And I'm taking a lot of time to say this. But the point is something that beautiful, something that masterful, something that extraordinary. And the interesting thing is except for a few of the really big time concert pianists, they make some pretty good money. Yeah. And I suppose you really put yourself into it and do it really hard for a long time, you'll make a good living.
Yeah.
But in general, concert pianists are not going to get anything close to what Michael Jordan was paid.
Oh no.
Or what Pete Rose might have been paid, or Reggie Jackson or something like that. You know,
or Liberace.
Ain't gonna happen.
Maybe Liberace.
Yeah. So, but then ultimately, look at me and Elmer. I mean, we survived. We pay our bills, and I think we're reasonably happy guys.
Oh yeah.
And we love what we do, and we love this and trying to share it with you and everything. But we worked our butts off in our lives to be able to do what we do. And I don't regret it for a minute.
No.
Because when I'm practicing and just making this stuff happen, and when I listen to some of these performances of mine, I was looking for my own teachers. Howard Carr from Juilliard, he's got stuff up. And, you can find it. Larry Graham, a little bit, it was a winner in the Queen Elizabeth, yes. But some of my other people that I thought of when I remember their playing and stuff, there's no evidence up there. They might have come a little too soon for that, but there's some people whose videos have gone up. I got a lot of stuff up on there because I've made use of it intentionally with the COVID year concerts that I did for the AmeriCorps and things like that. And I watched some of it, and I watched it, and I thought, yeah, some of it's actually pretty good. You know, I think about it. I'm glad to have that up there. There's little moments, like I said about the rest thing, like, oh, just wait a little longer. But it's like you're a pretty decent athlete, and then the coach shows you how you could have run around that guy in the replay. Okay, coach, all right, next time. So the next time I play that piece, I'm going to remember to take a little more time. You know, but what I'm getting at, folks, is it's totally worth it.
Yes.
But it's going to take
an
investment of mostly time.
It's a labor of love, folks.
Yeah, there you go. Love for yourself, you know. And it has its own rewards. Because as you move towards levels of mastery, you're going to be happy and then stunned and then deeply appreciative of the things that you can do. Mostly because other people are going to be not just like proud parents, you know, we didn't talk about that. No, to get to a point where somebody comes up to you with tears in their eyes and said, that was so beautiful. How do you do that? You know? And to be able to affect people in a way, in a profound and spiritual way, to awaken their eyes, their ears to the things that we understand because of our work, the connection with the divine and the energies around us and everything, to make that stuff palpable in ways. This is the kind of magic that lies in music, and I don't mean to abuse it in this sense, but the power that you can have to weave magic spells as a real musical wizard. So what I'm saying there is practice your scales.
Yes.
All right.
Absolutely.
Just down at the bottom of the page. Okay, and I told her we wouldn't like going forever about stuff, but we did with that one.
Okay.
But I won't do that again. I won't do that again.
All right.
That was my one homily.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Talks about the value of ear training, people.
Ear training, oh,
is very
boy.
important for
Yes.
pianists. The pupil who cannot identify chords, such as common chords, 1, 3, 5
Major,
tonic chords,
yeah.
or seventh chords
Yep.
by ear, stands about as much chance of entering the higher realms of music as the student who does not understand a word of Latin does of comprehending a page from Virgil when he hears it read to him.
Yeah.
Read that nice little paragraph right there.
There is no way of dodging or sidestepping this knowledge. I am obliged to say 100 times a week. Listen to what you are playing. Holy moly.
My God, listen.
Gosh, what words of wisdom that is. Yeah.
Then he gets into touch, and
Yeah.
this is something I think is relatively true. Can you show him that picture?
Yeah, I'll show them the picture.
He's showing the difference
Look at
between
this.
what would be 18th century and probably some early 19th century finger technique at the keyboard versus what he thinks is appropriate coming out of the post-Anton Rubinstein period. And it's because of the changes and the developments in the instrument.
Yeah.
We went from, I was reading about Malcolm Bilson last night too,
Yeah.
how he got started with it and everything. He studied with Georgi Shandor. Malcolm Bilson.
He did?
He studied with Georgi Shandor.
Oh,
This guy is a major ass-kicking Hungarian
Wow.
pianist, right?
yeah.
And I've got his Grofiev sonatas and stuff.
Yeah.
Shandor was an amazing pianist. Malcolm Bilson, Mr. Forte piano. He studied with Shandor, but it was interesting how he got started with it. I won't go into all of it. Maybe we could feature it at some point in the future. But he did what I would say he talked about is how hard it was for him at the beginning.
Yeah.
When he was presented with a copy of a around 1800 piano.
Yeah.
And to play some music on it.
Yeah.
And he said there was a huge audience that came because they was all curious. This is 1969. This is like nobody was hardly doing this stuff. But he talked about what a challenge it was to adapt his technique to the instrument.
Yeah.
But in doing so, he began to see things realizable in the score, which he realized he just like played over.
Yeah.
Because the big thing that we go for is huge lines,
Yeah.
big long romantic lines, romantically felt stuff, and all
Yeah.
this. But if you look at true 18th century expression, it's not a lot smaller than that. It's all about little gestures and moments, and
Right.
spits and pauses and things like that.
Yeah.
And the instrument avails itself of that stuff very easily.
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't have this long line, which says something that, of course, there was singing and there were long lines. There were violins that could play, there were woodwinds that could play. But it appears that was not the general aesthetic in the music making. There seems to have been a lot more rhythm and a lot more articulation.
Yeah.
There were long sentences, one might say, but then the way I speak, probably a lot of little phrases within the sentences before you get to the period.
Right.
And that seemed to be more important. Well, that affected the way he learned how to play. Well, then when you look at the development of the piano through the 19th and into the 20th century, even the late 20th century, with some things that Kawai introduced, more internal mechanisms. But the most important thing probably was Liszt started to do these public recitals as such. A lot of them were house concerts. A lot of them were in palaces or things like that.
Yes.
There weren't a ton of big places that were available. Opera houses, some here and there, you could play in. It was the English, actually, and then eventually the Americans as well, who began to build performance halls, real places for money-paying public to come and hear things. That wasn't really basically happening when Liszt was publicly active. That started to happen after he had retired from that, more or less.
Wow.
But he had to fill out the hall.
Oh yeah, of
The
course.
bigger the halls they got, the less likely we would want to hear tinky-linky-link, tinky-link, tinky-linky-link.
Yeah.
Not that there's anything wrong with that, but tinky-linky-link in a soiree room, you know, in a big house in Paris or in Berlin or something, that's fine. You know, I mean, even in this day and age, you can play a decent concert on a 5'10" piano in a nice sized home.
Yeah.
You know, and there is something too much piano in a too small space.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we had the chamber hall, which is where a lot of grad students played in Madison.
Yeah.
Largest piano we had in there was 7 foot, 7 foot 2, 7 foot 4.
Okay.
You know what they were?
Yeah.
Bechstein, American, Yamaha, I think.
Right.
Because they tried concert grands in there, and it was just. It's like the Maxell guy in the commercial. They're like, whoa! I mean, it was a big hall.
Yeah.
You know, several hundred people.
Right.
But Mills Hall, across over there on the other side of the building, that was over 2,000. Yeah. You had Imperial
There
Bersendorfer,
you go.
German Steinway,
Yeah.
American Steinway with a wing up and really blast them, you know, really full space. But then what Liszt, I think, especially was doing, what various pianists managed to succeed in doing was and composers are doing the same thing. But it's interesting, you know, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Was it the piano instrumental development? Which I definitely think then affected technique on the instrument.
Absolutely.
And then because of the nature of the piano that was available, what composers could suddenly do in some cases. I think it's all kind of glove in hand a little bit. Doesn't fit perfectly, and it's not all necessarily logical.
Yeah.
But the 19th century was remarkable because you went from a beautiful, explosive, rather percussive little thing called a forte piano that Mozart played to, you know, some really lovely instruments. Certainly by the early 20th century, the Steinway A or the B.
Yes.
Even more so in some ways, the Mason and Hamlins, because of that tension resonator thing. Wow, you get a parlor size Mason Hamlin, 6'6". Sounds like a concert grand. I mean, big sound of those things. You get original concert grand from the Mason Hamlin, you don't have no trouble being heard over an orchestra.
Wow.
It's a big, full present sound. And now they've got what the Falcones and is that what they call them? The Italian
Fazoli's?
Fazoli's and I saw that. Didn't I send you a video a long time ago of that huge 12 or 15 foot piano that Hungarian guy made?
Oh,
did you ever see that?
Yeah, I did.
Somebody
That's
played Liszt.
huge. Yeah.
This big monster piano.
Yeah. I saw that.
Very impractical.
Yeah.
But
and even then, have you ever played on the Imperial Dusseldorf?
yes.
How does that low key even have a pitch?
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like
No,
it.
it does.
All I hear is.
Well, it's really cool to watch it because the string.
Yeah.
It's just shaking like this.
Yeah.
But it works. I mean, it works. I played the Brahms First Sonata on the Imperial Bersendorfer. Had an interesting experience because the nature of the instrument, because it's so much longer and everything.
Yeah.
It doesn't have as much of a big crossover of this, you know, the bass strings and everything coming over that way and intentionally crossing the grains of the soundboard. It's not straight strung, but it's closer to that.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting playing it on the Imperial Bersendorfer because Brahms preferred straight string pianos.
Yeah.
I mean, there was no crossing the strings. They went all the way from front to end, straight down.
Yeah.
And there were certain pianos in the 19th century where he had it wasn't a Blüthner, what was his instrument? I can't remember at the moment, but he had a straight string piano in his apartment, his home where he lived. That's what he wrote on. Streicher, yes. The later 19th century Streicher. And Erard, the great French maker that really kind of in a sense built pianos as Liszt went along that he loved very much. Liszt preferred the Erard pianos.
Yeah.
They chose in 1899 to close their factories because they
Breaks the heart.
refused to capitulate to making cross
Strings. Yeah, I
They
remember.
did not. That was not their religion. They weren't going to do it. They weren't going to step into Satan's realm, and that was it. They quit making
Yeah.
pianos.
I'm not going to do it. Dad.
Chopin loved the Pleyel,
Yeah, he
which
did.
continued to be built. Pleyel was the company that built one of Lewandowski's first harpsichords.
Yeah.
And if you've ever had a chance to play the Pleyels, what's really magic there, it's a lighter, tinny, I don't mean tin in a bad way, but a little more delicate
Yeah.
kind of sound. And the dampers are made in such a way that they more or less rest on the string.
Yeah.
Now, it's not a sloppy mechanism,
Right.
but it's not
Yeah.
hold down. It's dampened. And like when you put the key down and the damper goes up and the hammer strikes the string, boom, boom. You know?
Really?
And it was interesting when I played Horowitz's piano. It was a very fast selection. I would say it was super light, but it was.
Yeah.
But some cool things about it is when I played Bach on it, his dampers were as tight as a drum, but they moved immediately. Everything from the moment that you begin to move the key, things would move.
Yeah.
So you could get, if you wanted to, a very easy harpsichord-like dryness in the piano for that. But then the bloom, on the other hand, I've never heard a bloom so long on any piano.
Yeah.
Just I mean, at least three clumps, three blooms, maybe almost a fourth one in some cases, depending on where you were.
Yeah.
That thing would sing forever when you let it go, when you lifted up the dampers. And you never needed to push the damper pedal down more than halfway.
Yeah.
Because already, from the moment that you touch the pedal, by the time you're half pedal, the rest of the half of the movement would be just like stupidly flooring the car.
Yeah.
As like trying to grind your foot through the bottom of the car to get it to go fast. It was useless. It was all right there at the top of everything. Everything was just like that.
Yeah.
Well, with the Pleyel with Chopin, the dampers were not so strongly held down. And when you play a Pleyel from his period of time, there's a certain kind of haze to kind of describe it. There's a very gentle, soft kind of spirit. It's like a ghost. Instead of Elmer sitting here, the ghost of Elmer sitting there. So he's still there, but it's mostly essence and there's no corporeal material. There's that in the sound of a Pleyel. When we play it, it was a kind of a ghostly kind of a resonance that existed. And then the pedals would move very easily. The Erard was a much harder piano, which was, I think, really built to fill spaces. It could be a little stiff, in my impression. One thing that they hadn't really figured out, like Konrad Graf pianos, the early German pianos that were coming to face, and not so much Beethoven, but Schubert, late Schubert, and then especially Schumann. Konrad Graf built beautiful pianos. I love them in general, my favorite instrument from the 19th century. But you got to get used to them because they still used what was called a Prellmechanik, which was the original Viennese system that moved the dampers and the hammers. And they didn't accommodate for the extra weight in the key. So it would be a little heavier to play. But then over time, as they added that kind of weight and everything, you'll see with pianos, preferably less than more, because it's kind of a shortcut way of dealing with it. They drill holes in the keys and put weight counterweights in them to kind of give you a lighter kind of feeling at the front. But then some pianos might say that makes it feel a little boinky, 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 almost like a boat on the water.
Yeah.
They kind of have a little too much almost free movement themselves. Really well-made pianos have very few weights in the keys themselves, the key levers, but they're just super balanced and all that. Now, what does it have to do with any movers?
So you were talking about the
The movement.
movement of the fingers,
Okay.
tone and all that, and how that affected
And
whether.
what we'll get to in a moment,
Yeah.
what he's saying about, he's talking about having a good touch
Yeah.
is that you have more of the fleshy part of your fingertip against the key.
Yeah.
Right? And you're moving more from up here at the metapharyngeal joint,
Okay.
right? This is for carpal, yes, metacarpal.
Metacarpal joints.
Metacarpal joint up here from the hand. Now, the next thing I have highlighted there is something he said, which Miss Fontill used to talk about on page 15.
Okay.
One general principle, however, is that of striking key bottom. Many students do not learn this. The piano key must go all the way down in the production of good tone. The habit of striking it halfway accounts for much white or colorless play. He gets into some more specifics about this. Good, is it okay to move, or is there anything you have in there? I was going to move on to the next chapter, continue with the touch stuff.
No, we can move on.
Page 17. Every piano student who aspires to acquire a beautiful tone must have a mental concept of what a beautiful tone is. Now, I don't think that just means necessarily music tone.
Yeah.
But like, I don't know if you heard that through the glass out there. I've got the air conditioning because it's in the 80s here. But I have this wonderful bell thing made in Arizona by Mexico. You got a chime.
Yeah.
You know, there's some which are kind of not good quality.
Yeah.
Takey.
Yeah.
But then you know those big, beautiful columnar things
Yep.
that people get?
Yeah.
This wall, and it sounds like a gong or something beautiful. Whatever is beautiful to you, is it you remember your grandma singing in the kitchen? Or what is it? What are beautiful, what would you might consider comforting, qualitatively good sounds that please you, that please your ear?
Yeah.
You know, the way that they're made. I don't think you have to restrict it to just piano playing by certain things. You can listen to certain pianists you like and see if you can begin to imitate their sound. Or singers whose voices you like and see if you can imitate that. But I think it's important to open your ears up to sound in general.
Oh, absolutely.
And be able to discern what, at least you, will consider, well, that's a more beautifully made sound with that than that is.
Yeah.
You know, to begin to distinguish. Because it's this distinguishing which is going to clarify things in your ear and your brain so that you develop an ear.
Yeah.
People say he's got a good ear. The next page, or 18, says the main principle of the first is see that the key is touched with as resilient a portion of the finger as possible. If a lovely ringing, singing tone is desired instead of a hard metallic. The key is touched with as large a surface of the first joint of the finger as is possible. And then he goes on to say the next page, 19. This is putting it all together. This part the wrists.
Yeah.
If the cushions of the flesh on the ends of the fingers, right?
Yeah.
If those are the pneumatic tires in piano playing, those like really good quality rubber tires. The wrist is the spring or the shock absorber.
Yes.
Okay? So, my dad loved Cadillacs. You can imagine why, because especially at the moment. I remember when we used to go on Old Route 40 from Springfield to Columbus once a year in the summer to go to the zoo, because they hadn't completed 70 yet.
Right.
And he had a 62 four-door Fleetwood sedan.
Jeez.
Cadillac. It was built the same year I was born. With the bench seats, front and back.
Wow.
All electric, everything electric.
Jeez. Yeah.
I mean, no matter what was going on outside on the road, the car was like
Sounds like sitting in your
or
chair.
on a sofa or something. I mean, kaboom! Between what was going on in the tires, the shock
Yep.
absorber, and the springs and the bitches and everything.
Didn't feel a thing.
And then now, my God, nowadays when you get your higher end vehicles,
Yeah.
even a high end Jeep or something, the computer now moves the car in such a way, it controls things that it tries to move the shock away from you, so that it actually feels as comfortable as possible.
Really? I didn't know they did that.
Yeah, they got a lot of wild things they can do now with new cars.
My
But-
car still gets them.
This is what he's talking about is something that Miss Van Til talked about. My teacher Ellsworth talked about. Really changed my playing. This is this for a singer.
Yeah.
It's the throat. If your throat gets tight and you're singing, you're preventing the air from moving freely. You're preventing the vibrations from moving into the mouth, which is the resonance chamber.
Yeah.
And you're going to hurt yourself. Your voice box, you're going to get vocal nodes and all kinds of crap, bad things happen. You're going to wear out the vocal cords. Terrible things happen.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the same thing can happen in this way. With a pianist, if you ever hear, what is it that people get?
Oh, carpal tunnel?
Carpal tunnel syndrome.
Yeah.
That's usually happening because there's too much tension passing in the carpal tendons, right, between the bottom of the arm and go through the hand into the fingers. There's some muscles. There's a muscle here which is used to not extend, but to adduct the thumb, and to some extent also here on the right side of the hand to be able to do this, all right, to adduct the fingers in a way. But the muscles that really fundamentally make that happen are here in the arm.
Yeah.
And that stuff is controlled by tendons that are connecting to the bones and causing these things to happen. The idea that you have individual muscular control of the fingers, if a teacher ever tells you that, that's BS. Because what's moving the fingers are tendons.
Yeah.
Right? There's a little bit of flesh on there, a little bit of muscle, that can do certain things like that. But it's important to keep the sucker open and loose and working. Not just up and down, but also laterally, horizontally.
Yeah.
Right? And did I read that, or does he say that? He always said that.
Yeah.
Oh, on page 21, I like this.
Okay.
It says, as the finger touches the key surface, it feels as though it were grasping the key, not striking or hitting it. Always feel as though you had hold of the key, not that you're merely delivering a blow to it.
Yeah.
Miss Montel, when I went to study with her, she was really thick glasses. She was an old lady by the time I was studying with her, and still lived for her. I think she lived to be almost 100 years old, which means she was somewhere in her 80s when I worked with her. And she was quite an elegant old lady, but she had really thick glasses. And I was part of her teaching when I was with her. It was a summer. I had been studying with Professor Wynn. But anyway, she would sit right next to me, either on my right side or my left side. And she'd often touch my wrist or my hand while I was playing. Yeah. And she'd move there and make sure that it was away from the body.
This is while you're playing.
While I was playing. With the idea that the fingers are still connected to the keys and that they should be playing, It might cause a little bit of lurchiness, but it wasn't, just very gentle. Just things like that. And then sometimes she'd take my hand off and she'd squeeze my fingers from one side to the next, fingertips. And she'd squeeze between the nail and the flesh part of it. She said, that area right there. She said, you want to feel like there's an eye so that it can see. So it's like your mind sees into the key. There's an eye that is consciousness in the fingertip. Yeah. But sometimes it's also like a mouth, which is allowing the breath to pass into the key. All right. And then at other times she also said it's also a little bit like a sucker on an octopus.
Right.
You know, where you feel like, you know, you can kind of pull away. You're not, you kind of keep it there,
Yeah.
but you feel like you can pull away, but it won't let go. So there's a kind of an adhesiveness there. It's really easy to do on them old ivory keys.
Yeah.
Because once you get a little oil or sweat or anything just from working on your fingertips, they don't slide on ivory.
Yeah.
Must have been one of the reasons why they made it like that. I don't know. But nowadays they have a fake ivory, which is better than the 70s and earlier 80s when they had that plastic crap. That was like skating on ice. That was awful. But she would talk about making that kind of keep contact. And then when I went to study with Ellsworth after my master's degree, he really emphasized all this wrist stuff, the floating arm, and how that affects the tone. And it's true, you know, that before Ellsworth, because I wouldn't say I mastered it with Miss Montiel, but before Ellsworth, people would often say, oh, my playing was very exciting, very dramatic.
Right.
Power. You know, and I did bring a lot of problems.
Yeah, I fell under that spell. I did.
But the additional comment, I still got, you know, people would say I was very excited, but I started to hear the word after I was playing with Ellsworth. It was so beautiful that they thought the tone was so beautiful. Nobody ever said that my playing was beautiful, not earlier on. But man, I could rip into that thing and really crash it. Thrashed it.
It was like Zeus sending down thunderbolts. This guy.
I didn't get away with it when you're young and stupid.
Oh, come on!
But I mean, eventually.
Why'd you have to say that?
Well, no. I mean, it's good. It's good, and it you know, I think it represents a kind of a youthful vigor approach, which hopefully one still has sufficiently. Yeah. But I definitely changed. That I moved towards this idea of an envelope, an aesthetic envelope of loveliness about the whole experience. There's something beautiful in an old Greek sense about it. Even when I was playing avant-garde music, Ellsworth is a big influence on that. Because I met John Cage a couple of times, Ernest Cunningham, and I played one of my doctoral lecture recitals on Cage. And what I remembered very well, which stuck in my mind, was an influence for me, is Ellsworth did one time when John Cage came to Madison, and the Alvey Museum had a big exhibition of his paintings and things like that. And there was also a Frank Lloyd Wright exhibit about some of his models of buildings that had never been built. And then Ellsworth, they played more John Cage on the public radio station through the university than they ever had in the history of the radio station. Wow. And Ellsworth gave a historical concert going back to the first two pieces that Cage published when he'd studied with Arnold Schoenberg, through some various works like the Water Music, I forget now, Radio, is it not Radio Berlin, but something like that. Various pieces all the way up to 1/5, which was a piece that Cage wrote later in his life and dedicated to him. 20 minutes. And everything about it was beautiful. I mean, all the playing was beautiful. So, what I wanted to point out is, he talks about the really, this is something I think that's important. He talks about more technical things, but I think this is important. On page 26, the second paragraph, before proceeding further, it might be well to note that the player can actually think moods and conditions into his arm and fingers. His mental attitude means a great deal in the quality of his playing. In my master's degree with Howard, I really began to think about that. And then when I was moved on to Ellsworth and was something like that, and when I do it now, just about think 10 times I play once, you have a clang ideal, an ideal sound that you want, which is inspired by the music on the page, and other things. What period of music is it? Who is that specific composer? What do we tend to think his voice sounds like on the piano?
Yeah.
So forth, all those things. And then, hopefully at a certain level, how am I going to achieve that physically? What are the things that I need to do? How do I think about the overall ambient volume of the sound? What is going to happen from the muscles and from the gestures that I make that are going to make that happen? Now, I would say a lot of that is almost infinitesimal thinking.
Yeah.
Because you say, well, Master, I am to some extent.
Yeah.
It's almost automatic.
Mm-hmm.
It goes on. I mean, I've already know I've got it, and then I play it, and it usually I get what I want. Mm-hmm. And it gives me what I want.
Right.
Sometimes you have to practice. The whole point of practicing is to get it more and more refined.
Yeah.
But I don't think about thinking 10 times and playing once. I think being objective and self-aware and helpfully self-critical.
Yeah.
Not tearing you apart, self-apart, but building yourself up and encouraging, self-encouraging and all those kind of things. But all those kind of things are important in an art form. Running back for a football team, or studying jujitsu and how to throw the guy, or aikido, which just means anybody can bring anything at you, and you learn how to defend against it.
Yeah.
And move that energy away from you and away from your attacker, because then that's the aikido philosophy. You don't attack, right, and you don't willfully injure. You just try to take the energy and get rid of it.
Yeah.
That involves a lot of this. And I don't expect it maybe with the little kids when they get started something, but at some point, you need to make this like your private meditation time, your private prayer time, and just make it about you and the problems at hand and the things that you're trying to do. And what I think I learned with the people who are doing this seriously, let's say piano students, especially when I was in Cyprus, I sometimes had to get kids like caught up and moving towards the ultimate goal of the senior recital, for example. Yeah. Efficiency. Efficiency of thinking and of moving and of working as efficiently as possible to achieve the goal in the shortest amount of time, and then be able to repeat it consciously. Do it again. Do it again. Make sure it's happening. My thing with them was I said do it 3 times in succession, and if they're all successful, there's no drops, no fallouts, no mistakes, there's a good marriage here between the brain and your heart and your mechanism in terms of making it happen. I'm not so much concerned about the delicacy thing. That's kind of, one thing I did want to point out.
Yeah.
He had the opportunity to know Anton Rubinstein, who one might say was in his lesser years, but still.
Oh yeah.
I mean, the founder of the whole Russian school. I was reading at one point about this with Anton Rubinstein. Yeah. People were saying, we're going to do this in Russian? This is a European thing. Shouldn't we be teaching in French or German or something? Because that's where you went to learn from the right thing. And it was such a brave and novel idea. No, we're going to study it in Russian. This is going to be a school of a Russian conservatory where we teach harmony and we learn harmony and we learn all of these things in Russian. And you understand what I was saying in a way is, look at the self-doubting, self-cutting attitudes apparently that people would have had about themselves versus the great, artistic or aristocratic achievements of the Europeans. So everybody wanted, French at one time was the universal court language. Everybody spoke French. No, but this was true. But Rubinstein is credited with being the father of the
Russian,
whole
yeah.
Russian school. Alexander Salati brought Liszt's traditions over there.
Yeah.
But then Leshetinsky taught
Yeah.
in St. Petersburg with Nicholas Rubinstein for
Yeah.
a period of time. And he was trained by Czerny, the whole thing, you know, the whole Beethoven tradition.
Yeah.
But had come from Poland, I think, and then
Yes,
went
it was from Poland.
St. Petersburg. St. Petersburg was originally the capital of Russia.
Yeah.
Moscow came later. And the Moscow Conservatory was later than St. Petersburg.
Yeah.
Actually, it was started by Nicholas, right? Because Anton ran the one in St. Petersburg,
Yeah.
and Nicholas was in Moscow.
Yeah.
So I'm wrong about that. Leshetinsky was at St. Petersburg, so he was with Anton Rubinstein.
Yeah.
And moved then from there to Vienna to bring those traditions out of there. But no, I wanted to see the picture.
Yes.
Because what he's saying here, I'll read to them.
I'll bring it over.
While you show it. He said, look at Rubinstein. He says, notice instead of sitting bolt upright, as the pictures in most instruction books would have the people do, he's inclined decidedly toward the keyboard. In all his 14 passages, he employed the weight of his body and shoulders. This was most noticeable, and the student should remember that when playing a concerto, Rubinstein could be heard over the entire orchestra playing fortissimo. The piano seemed to peal out gloriously as the king of the entire orchestra, but there was never any suggestion of noise or disagreeable pounding. And the one thing he said, why no noise? Because Rubinstein's wrists were always free from stiffness. I think this is some really good stuff. He goes on to talk memorization. Well, he talks the next chapters about accuracy. And accuracy, my comment was, well, necessary, and then I wrote at some point, duh. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, our whole point in doing what we do, the performers, I've always felt, I think I was trained in such a way as good by my teachers and everything. I had a real respect for the composer. If anything, because when I was a student, I had to compose. I had to write music.
Yeah.
You know, I was made to, so that you can demonstrate, you know, your understanding, your cumulative collection of all the skills and things that you can write something. I wrote some decent stuff. Actually, I played last night. There's a recording I made for the minor chord during that COVID year where I played 4 of my own compositions. They're actually okay. But it's like Rubinstein says in his biography. He says, I'm no composer. I was never a composer.
Yeah.
I'm a recomposer. Which is what we're doing, which is what we do. We take somebody else's ideas and interpret them. And in some cases, maybe recompose it as too big an ego.
Yeah. I mean, that I've sort of been a little bit divided on that. You know, on one hand, you know, you're an artist, you know, and you sift the music through yourself and put your own personality to it. But then there's the other side that says where you're to translate the composer's intentions.
Well,
How
I
much of
think
yourself are you allowed to put in?
I think it's an interesting
You know what I mean?
quandary because, you know, I'm reading this book, which at some point I will discuss with you.
Yeah.
Which is 19th century pianism. Written by a Scottish pianist and professor. Really well researched, really cool. Very dense, so I'm taking my time going through it because I'm loving every page. Taking lots of notes and things. But the early part, I mean, going back to Mozart, Beethoven, all the way through Mendelssohn, to a great extent through Liszt's initial concertizing. Improvisation was the name of the game.
Yeah.
That was what everybody wanted to see. You wanted to see what you could pull out of your head and do magically with no music in front of you. However, the earlier part of the program, when you are playing some music, be it yours, most likely it was yours, or perhaps another composer, then the music was up there on the piano. Because you don't have any right to play that music without it being there. So make sure you play everything that's on the page.
Yeah.
The idea of being able to do that by memory was not appreciated early on, and it was actually frowned on.
Yeah.
Liz started to get away with it because he's such a charmer and
Yeah.
such an extraordinary musician.
Yeah.
But
He's
he's one of the ones that did that. Clara Schumann really introduced the idea of performing by memory, because she was quite good at it. And it started at that point. Arnold Schoenberg, at the turn of the century and into the 20th century, said, unless you can sit down and write the score out with paper and pencil exactly the way that it looks in the score, you do not have it memorized, and you should not play without the score, because you're inevitably leaving things out. Well, this guy, when you look at like his orchestration of the Brahms Hungarian G minor quartet, for piano and strings, and the orchestra stuff, superior music arranger and transcriber. I mean, and that kind of a person at that level really has to see the nooks and crannies in everything to make it right, you know? So he has a right to be saying something like that, I think. But I think what you're talking about, and I guess what it is, because it's just sometimes it's the artist.
Yeah.
And it's also different periods of time.
Yeah.
I think coming out of the 19th century into the 20th, it was still considered the artiste. You know?
Yeah, the golden age?
Yes, to create this kind of magic, you know, and there was these great concert pianist composers that create these wonderful wild ditties. It was post-Lisztian kind of magic, you know. But Schnabel might be held partially responsible for the change. And you know, when you look at the difference, well, like what Rachmaninoff used to say about Friedman.
Yeah.
I loved Friedman's playing. I loved the way that he did the phrase. And Rachmaninoff's playing is really very fascinating.
Oh, yeah.
And extraordinary, really, from a technical point of view. But when you think about it, compared to some of the earlier playing, it's, God knows, it's not boring, it's not just...
Oh, definitely.
But it's more about what's there on the page. I mean, and he had very strong structural ideas about the playing and everything the way he does. And there's Arthur Rubinstein, you know, comes in, and his Chopin playing is a world of difference from Rachmaninoff or Friedman.
Yeah.
There was, and I would say there was this school of a little bit more rationalistic devotion, more and more. This is probably influenced by the German musicologists and the ability for us to reclaim the manuscripts, to have a greater objectivity in terms of the original thing versus our interpretation of it. And I think that was happening in the science of archaeology. They came up with all kinds of crock-full of shit ideas about what the stuff meant that they dug up out of the ground.
Yeah.
But you know, you can see now that there's a scientific objectivity which has respect for the origins, the original cultural origin, the original ideas, the original people that had this stuff, and really having the scientific ability now to pretty much, honestly, not 100%, but well towards 100%. Going back and interpreting things probably pretty honestly and fairly in terms of its origins and what it was when it was used. However, I think because we have that newly developed scientific ability, like with Yun Chan Lun's playing, or was the guy, I can never remember his name, who plays in France, he was a student of Kid Armstrong. Not so much Kid, because he's more about historic playing, which is cool. And Melvin Tan, who was a 14th pianist, studied at the Yodi Minot School. But Yunchun Lim is very refreshing for me because in more recent years, actually, I really finally discovered Ignaz Friedman and what people write about him.
Yeah.
He plays very familiar repertoire, but when he plays it, it sounds like he composed it. But there's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's totally convincing.
Uh-huh.
It's totally exciting. The rhythmic vitality is
Yeah.
extraordinary.
Yeah.
And it feels almost improvised in a way.
Yeah.
But it's all the notes, it's everything that's right there, but there's something eternally fresh about it. Even
Yeah.
if it's a recording and you listen to it again, it's still.
Yeah.
Yunchun Lim is playing in my mind that way. And he's not the only one.
No.
There's some music making that's coming back, which is. Well, what about this way? What about, the gesture or the smaller considerations? One might say, I think the height of the kind of 20th century playing, and I'm not putting down anything because I admire the guy hugely, but certainly a kind of a more objective, less 19th century subjectively or willfully interpreted concept. The one I think it represents really excellent 20th century idealism based upon what we think of as a objective,
Yeah.
but vigorous and interesting and healthy interpretations. Alfred Brendel.
Alfred Brendel. See, I would have said Pellini.
Or Pellini. Yeah.
Pellini.
Both of them.
Yeah.
In different kinds of ways.
Or even Leon Fleischer at moments, particularly the way he does the Beethoven Concerti.
Mm-hmm.
He lays it out there. It's almost like he just built something. And here it is. This is the piece.
It was really eye-opening or ear-opening to me was when I got the box set of Adolf Busch recordings.
Yeah.
The Busch brothers. There was Adolf was a violinist.
Yeah.
He had his brother was a cellist. There was another one who was a string player, and then the other brother was the conductor.
Uh-huh.
Eventually escaped the Nazis and went to South America. Adolf Busch's daughter was married by Rudolf Serkin.
Yeah.
And they got the Schubert trios, at least the first one, in there. And I think there's Brahms. Yeah. There is something masculine and compelling and driven in Serkin's playing, which makes me understand finally as a mature artist and such, and kind of coming to it later in the game, but something compellingly modern about his playing that was so convincing. And Rubinstein's Chopin, I think, hit the world like that too. How would you describe it? I mean, the thing that Yunchun Lim does it, or Friedman, it's not as we used to complain about them, that it was willful or this or that, because as we'll share with you at some point with the Leschetitsky books, there were rules about how to do these things. And I think it would have come from a lot of change. The present-day modern piano with very few significant changes has been the same since the early 20th century. I mean, that was pretty much it. There have been some slight modifications of things, but in general, the way it plays, the way it sounds, the general mechanism, the cross-stringing and all that, that's at least 100 years old, pretty much unchanged.
Yeah.
But when all these guys were growing up, the whole lifetime of Saint-Saëns, imagine from the 1820s until he died, 30s and
30s,
died
yeah.
in the 1920s.
Uh-huh.
Ancient guy when he finally died. I mean, he was alive when Chopin was still alive.
Mm-hmm.
He was born when Chopin was alive. Died around the time of the First World War, something like that.
Yeah.
All the technological changes that happened, and it must have affected him. I don't know. I mean, if it comes along, you just got to adapt, right?
Yeah.
Perhaps.
Yeah.
I don't know how much you're conscious of it, but how much changing you must have done. But then people are always a little bit more conservative, and some people are not so. And the conservative ones want to try to hold on to things in certain ways. Like, who's the guy that said to Chopin, give me a year and I'll teach you how to play the piano?
Oh, yeah.
Kalkbrenner.
France.
He was very highly regarded, and his technique was perfect for the older type of pianos.
Yeah.
But Chopin was a modernist, clearly, what he was bringing in.
Oh, yeah.
Very different. So, I just
2
think,
hours.
I think what's kind of exciting, well, what I'm really happy about is because in my own life, I mean, Arthur Rubinstein is still one of my heroes. I like
Oh,
him.
yeah.
But I got newer ones who I also admire for the playing. Like I always talk about Friedman.
Yeah.
And earlier on, Arthur Rubinstein was like the model of what I wanted to be.
Uh-huh.
And there's nothing against the man. I mean, I still love the 60s recordings of all the Chopin and stuff.
Uh-huh.
When he plays that, it's so utterly convincing. It's like, of course, that's the way it should go. That's the way it should be. But I'd say that probably not the only guy. But if there's one kind of illuminating light, which is the way I would like to model my playing around now, and I'm nowhere really close to it, really. The same thing would be Friedman.
That's right, Friedman.
The in the moment vitality, the freshness of it, the turning of the phrases and things which seem natural, and maybe attention to smaller details and nuances in ways. Not that you draw the whole attention to it, but it creates. It's like my father used to say when he made his tomatoes. He was a great cook. My dad said, "You know what the secret is to taking the acid out and bringing depth into bolognese? Sugar."
Sugar.
What? Yeah.
Sugar.
Here, taste this. He had good tomato sauce he was using and everything. And he often made not just bolognese with the meat in it. Not just the marinara. And some fat in there and everything. And then he'd take some sugar and stir that. And then taste this. He did this when he was still alive years ago back at his house. And it's like the depth of the sauce just went, whoa, like this. Other sensations that were in there. What is that? But the sugar, that aspect of taste is what brought it. It wasn't sweet. It wasn't like suddenly sweet, but it just chemically clicked in some kind of way that it began to open things up, Oh, and the best thing is like fresh herbs. So one difference between throwing dried basil in your sauce or ripping fresh basil leaves and throwing it in at the last minute and let it start to sit there. You got it done, you get the heat turned off, it's still kind of bubbling and stuff. And you just let the basil release its oils into it. And then you kind of stir that in and everything. Oh my God, 10 minutes later, 15 minutes later. Well, even better was stuff like that I learned from my grandmother. Vegetable soup, sauces, gravies, things like that. Put them in the fridge for a couple of days and let them mature. And then get it back up, heat it up and stuff. Oh, she used to make vegetable soup on Mondays and not let anybody touch it till Friday.
Oh, gosh.
She'd put the pot in the back.
5 days?
So 4 days.
4 days.
She'd cook it all day long, very slowly. And then she'd put it in the back and she'd serve it on Fridays because then she wouldn't have to work so hard.
Okay.
And she put it as far back in the fridge behind everything else so Grandpa wouldn't get into it or anything.
Oh, gosh.
and then she'd pull it out and warm it up again slowly and serve it. And I don't know if you guys have had it, but sometimes I think like really well-made pizza, and you reheat it in the oven, not the micro-user, but really well-made pizza. It's still got a lot of good fat and wetness in the sauce and everything. Reheat it in the oven, not too fast, and you don't want to burn it or crisp it too much.
Yeah.
But it's just all warmed up and ready to go again. It's better than it was at the beginning.
Yeah, of course it is. Yeah.
Well, that's the kind of piano playing, music making that I want to do. I want mine to benefit from my, what's the word? Slow cooking and
Fermenting.
fermenting a little bit. I mean, that's the way to put it.
Yeah.
And then making it fresh again, to serve up in a way that has that kind of depth of my father's marinara or my bolognese sauce.
Yeah.
That's what I am trying to do with my music now. Reconsidering. I'm not playing. Well, I'm playing pieces that I've known for a long time. Not necessarily always things that I've had in my repertoire in the past.
Yeah.
Trying some new things that I haven't played.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to hear them and reconsider them. In a different way that it doesn't just sound, oh yeah, that's the Chopin third ballad. And the thing that I really had an argument with was, I won't mention it, but a fellow who was on my committee who I really respected very much. Yeah. Come from a great lineage. Got into an argument about traditions.
Traditions.
And he was very much of the kind of thing like, I studied with this teacher, who studied with this teacher, who studied with this teacher. And the reason you study with these people is because you want to learn their magic, and specifically what he was leading towards was their interpretation of that composer.
Yeah.
For example, Beethoven.
Yeah.
And we got kind of into a friendly and even then a testy argument. Because I started to say, well, I don't know about that kind of attitude because, if you want to play the Chopin B-flat minor sonata the way Rachmaninoff played it,
which is legendary, by the way.
why would you ever assume you could play it as well as he did?
Yeah.
Since we have a recording of Rachmaninoff playing the B-flat minor sonata, and you think that's the sine qua non of all performances that have ever been done of it,
Yeah.
why would you attempt to do
Do it again.
I mean, if in your mind that's it, that's the best, why would you bring yourself to be a copyist?
Exactly.
And try to redo that? And subsequently especially COVID did this, and then in recent years it doesn't. You guys all know, I think that, well, between the two of us, we collect what we can.
Yeah.
But I've been buying some new recordings of different people. Nowadays, I go very much for the interpreter.
Yeah.
Because I pretty much know the bulk of repertoire and stuff.
Yeah.
So I've got some new things. I like the French pianist Yves Nat playing the Beethoven sonatas, a complete Beethoven sonatas. Well, of course, I have Wilhelm Kempf doing it too.
Yeah.
But then I also have Brendel and Schnabel and all this. I hate the idea. Now, I know it's something that in a sense we strive for, but what I love about it is the exceptions that are made in other world cultures. I hate the idea of perfection. I don't believe that it's in our nature as incorporated beings in this realm that God may have created or set up for us. But I don't think it's about trying to be godlike in this realm. Now, I don't mean that it isn't worth being ethically and morally and aesthetically working towards this beautiful and kind and compassionate
Yeah.
things as possible, and spiritually as well.
Uh-huh.
But what's the point of being here
Yeah.
in this body and being alive and a human being for several decades if you don't do it and use it? You know?
Yeah.
What I like in Japanese art, they have the concept of wabi-sabi, which the best example for which is in a very famous Zen garden. You know the rock garden? Everybody knows this garden.
Yeah.
It's like a sea of little stones, and then there's these two big patches, which are like islands,
Uh-huh.
that are in the middle of the sea of the white stones.
Yeah.
It's Ryoanji, which is one of the Zen temples in Kyoto. I went there many times to visit it. Now, intentionally, this was built back in the 1600s,
Yeah.
at least. Maybe in the later 1500s. I think it's 1600s. There's a better than knee high, probably mid thigh height, short wall that borders or holds the garden in, right? In a sense, it's background, and it's painted kind of a sandy taupey color, and it has red Japanese. Well, they're originally from Korea, the actual style, but they're typically red clay tiles that they put on top of it all around. Well, there's this garden, and it hasn't changed for hundreds of years since it's been done. It's perfect. The sea and the stuff, and yet it looks like it moves. They make it so that they rake it every day. They have to rake it in the morning and get everything there and make sure things are there. They keep the moss trimmed and so forth. It grows intentionally. They plant it in certain places. But over on this side of the wall, over there, there's a crack in the wall and in the plaster.
Yeah.
And there's a little tree branch. Not even tree, like a bush branch.
Yeah.
That sticks into the crack into the garden. Now you would have thought in 400 or 500 years they would have fixed it.
Yeah.
You know, that's easy to do. You just do a little bit of masonry and you patch it and paint it.
Yeah.
Cut the little twig off, and you got.
Yeah.
No,
they left it.
It's intentionally part of the design because we're humans. We're incapable of perfection. Only God, only the divine, is able potentially to make things truly perfect. When the Arabs make rugs, when they weave their rugs, they always weave a mistake into the rug. No Arabic rug is perfect.
Wow.
It's not supposed to be, even if they're made by reliable companies that mass manufacture them. They've got a little knot problem or something in it intentionally, because it's very much even against the religion to presume that you, as a human being, could be as perfect as Allah. So you don't do it. Well, and I also think that what is completion? Completion means that you have taken something to the point of being ultimately finished.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
To me, now that might be different than what people might interpret it, but to me, a life which is ultimately finished means that you die.
Yeah.
And you transform.
Right.
If you bring something to a point of perfection, you're bringing it to a point of transfiguration and change into something else. Yeah. And isn't that, in my mind, the nature of what the universe is about? Yeah. The universe may reach perfection in certain ways, but the moment that it does, it changes into something else. Yeah. Does it get better? Yeah, that's the idea that we tend to use. Shingon Buddhism believes that. That all life, they even believe that the divine aspect of life has the possibility to incrementally grow and improve on itself. And if it all happens throughout the galaxy in rare moments, all at once, then everybody profits. Everywhere in the galaxy. Because everything ticked up one tick, But it doesn't always happen that way, It happens in different ways until finally you get one where it's all together at one time. It's integrated.
Yeah.
So I like, there's something they say about Anton Rubinstein is one of the things they remarked about him is that he didn't worry about the missed notes.
No, he didn't.
What was more important was the integrity of the interpretation, the passion, the fullness of the emotion and the idea. And you leave some stragglers on the floor.
He also said, "Why look for spots on the sun?"
There you go.
That's what he said. I think it was because Hoffman had asked him about some of the peculiarisms in his playing at one of his recitals, and he says, and so his answer was, "Well, you can do what I do, if you can.
Yes,
But
I love
why
that.
look for spots on the sun?"
Apparently Hoffman may have said that, but there were other students of his who said that they were always surprised that Rubinstein, we're talking about Anton, that he always specified being very, very, very detailed and specific, paid attention to everything in the score.
Oh yeah.
They say, but master, you don't do that. You play with a great deal of freedom sometimes.
Yeah.
And his response would be, well, when you get as old as I am, and you want to do that, then you're free to do it. If you can.
One more thing about tradition.
Yeah.
There was somebody approached Toscanini, Arturo Toscanini, about tradition, and he gave his usual "bah." He says, "Tradition." He says, "You want to know what tradition is? Tradition is the last bad performance of a work." That's what he said. So, anyways, do you have any concluding remarks about the book?
I think it's a useful book. I mean, both of us have said to each other that we bought these copies early on.
Oh yeah.
I was studying with Professor Wynn. I was probably 15 or so, and I found my copy at the Springfield Mall, one of the bookstores, and I bought it. I've had it ever since. I even gave it a little home. That's why my copy is in such good shape.
Oh wow.
Keep it in this little plastic slip that I think I cut from a paper mailing that came in the mail, and I made it his little home.
You see, he's probably the smarter one of us too. He found a home for it right there. What's my idea of preserving this? I buy 2 copies. So the other one's sitting at home. This is the one I get to beat up and abuse. So, but no.
Obviously, I think
why did you buy this book? I bought it because of the guy who wrote it. I was first introduced to him from the recording he came out with on vinyl recording of the Schultz-Evler Blue Danube and the Schumann Toccata and the Chopin pieces in it, and and I didn't really find out about that recording until I first read this book recording review by Harold C. Schoenberg.
I had
you
this.
recall it?
Yeah.
It had the Chopin and Schumann.
The great pianists.
Yeah.
I in studying with Professor Wynn, I thank tremendously for what he did for me. But as I said, he was from that. I mean, basically, I don't know how to. Let's put it this way: he introduced me to Hannon, and I practiced my scales and played them for him and all that.
Yeah.
Arpeggios and things. Not so much. We spent most of our time on repertoire. Yeah. And I got started with him on certain things, and then he started after first year or so to really give me some stuff. Yeah. So the first year I had the Beethoven First Sonata, C minor Polonaise of Chopin. I don't remember what the stuff was, but within a relatively short period, then I was like doing the Fantasy in F minor, the C sharp minor Scherzo of Chopin. I mean, things were taking off, and the thing is when I was studying with him, a lot of the time he would say, "Well, let's work on the Beethoven next week." So I focus on Beethoven. Yeah. Well, how about next week you bring me a couple of Chopins? It wasn't like we worked on Beethoven week after week after week.
Right,
it was repertoire, next thing. I think he expected me then to take it home and work things out and stuff like that. But I had to keep repertoire going.
Yeah.
And when I thought about it in my whole career, For those 6 years I studied with Professor Wynn, I piled on a buttload of repertoire.
Oh yeah.
Lots of repertoire.
Yeah.
Now I think it's possible that by the time I was at my doctorate, I might have put on equally about as much,
Yeah.
and on my own as well,
Yeah.
because there's certain requirements that
Yeah.
they require you to know about things. But at least if you didn't perform it, you play it.
Yeah.
You know? But I was curious about how these people learn to play the piano. You read stories like early on. I found Arthur Rubinstein's first book.
Yeah.
The first book of memoir.
Yeah.
Reading about how he used to practice with Professor Bard.
Yeah.
And I read other stories here, and then I find about how people were put through the grist mill.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, I gotta make sure I'm putting myself through the grist mill so I can be just as good, right?
Yeah.
If I'm gonna hope to be like them, I want to do what they did.
Did exactly.
So I started to look for some things like that to fill in the gaps about practicing. And fortunately, I think scales remain. I always start with scales, very slowly, and then I move with them with the metronome, and then I do the whole circle of fifths in the Russian school way,
Yeah.
at a certain metronomic tempo.
Yeah.
I play some arpeggios for things. And interestingly, then I use little Czerny exercises. When I'm in really good shape, you pull out those little suckers, and you can really rip them off with really good, clean articulation, everything. And they're very simple and fun to play. It's like, if you want to play like Horowitz, you better know how to play a 2.5-minute piece like he did.
Yeah.
With that kind of super control and finesse, and to make it fabulous, you know.
Absolutely.
If you can hold somebody's attention for 2.5 to 3 minutes with that kind of magic, that's a whole different thing than endurance.
Yeah.
You know, which is playing the larger work.
Yeah.
And then I get to work on the big repertoire. But I went looking for all different things, and I'm still reading
Oh, absolutely. So
things
am I.
to
So am I.
understand and learn. Actually, we've still got some time, right?
We're running at 2:25.
Okay. Can we talk about just if you like?
Okay, sure.
You bring stuff too?
Huh?
You bring stuff too?
Did I bring stuff? That's like ask.
Well, first of
you
all,
know what I mean.
I want to return this to you.
Oh, okay. Oh,
Did we talk about it?
Sure.
We didn't talk about it in the show. Okay. Olga Samarov. We did talk about her in the show last,
We did.
but then it didn't get on.
Yeah.
Okay. Olga Samarov was born a whole bunch of American names.
Lucy something.
Hickenlooper.
Yeah.
In
Olga,
Texas.
so, yeah.
Her family was well-to-do.
Yeah.
She was born in San Antonio. They moved to Galveston.
Mhm.
And for the first 20 years of her life, her father's business would have made it possible for her to do what she did, which is go to Europe.
Yeah.
She was the first woman ever accepted by the Paris Conservatory.
Right.
However, I don't know how long she stayed there, because she said she was kind of put off by the conservatism
Yeah.
and the somewhat anti-femaleness of
Yeah.
the time. No, not even that so much. The anti-American
Yeah.
attitudes when she was there, which would have been early 1890s or something.
Yeah, it would
like
have
that.
to be.
So then she went to Berlin and continued to do some work, and she got married early to a aristocratic engineer who left Russia.
Mhm.
That didn't last too long. We won't go into all this. You can look her up and study it yourself. The important thing I found is when I listened to this, and it doesn't seem to be, because then I looked things up. I did find, fortunately, last time I told you it was going to cost me $25 or $30 between shipping and buying.
Yeah.
No way.
No.
I found one for $5.49 plus $5 shipping. So
Really? You're getting one?
this is an old opal pearl. I remember these. They used to. It's like what Marston does now.
Yeah.
Pull out these
Pretty much.
amazing things from the past.
And they'll probably find more of her.
The playing on here. It's stupendous, amazing. It's the best of old school playing. In that, what's really cool is that with some of the filigree stuff and things like that, she's not smearing it with metal. It's all
It's not.
gorgeous finger work. And there's some wonderful things in here. Leva Strom, for example, she plays the 18th cell of Moskovsky,
Yeah.
or was made famous for.
Yeah.
Plays it just as fabulous as he could. But then there are moments where she cuts loose. There's the organ fugue in G minor and the
Which is
Lecuona, where sometimes, or where she's playing less occasionally, she reaches out and grabs these huge octaves down in the bass or in the higher reaches. It's not written in the music, but
Yeah.
it's just in the moment.
Right.
She plays the Aufschwung with such masculine schwung, strength, and speed.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, when she plays the Ruins of Athens to begin with, which we both agree is probably Rubinstein's version of it.
Yeah.
She plays it with such grace and lightness.
Yeah.
And even though when it's strong and rhythmically strong, it's never ugly or harsh.
Right. Exactly.
This one was incredible. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Wonderful, wonderful
What you think?
discovery.
What do you think of the Wagner?
Ring of the Valkyries.
Yeah.
Ride of the Valkyries is very cool.
It's very good. Yeah.
I mean, this woman very clearly, she's playing there.
Yeah.
And what amazes me, come on, this is back in where they're grinding CDs. And I think what they were looking for back in those days, this was like the stories they tell about Moiseyevich.
Yeah.
They wanted artists that could come in and
Do it in one take.
1, 2, maybe 3, maybe if it'd be 5, maybe 5, but not a huge batch up, because then they're just using up material. It's costing them money. You could tell this woman that when she's playing, and as far as I can tell, because most of these pieces are played within the scope of a single side recording, right? It's played through with remarkable perfection, frankly, and acuity. Now, I won't surprise you. I found
What did you find?
On eBay, I think. Or where did I get it from Amazon?
Well, don't. Well, show me.
It's from the Houston Public Library.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I'm looking forward to reading this.
Oh, boy.
Because when we read about her biography and who she was, she discovered, basically, or introduced the world to Stokowski,
Yeah.
who was her second husband that she married when he was an organist in the
Look
church
at this.
in New York. By then, she was a pretty successful concert pianist. And there was an opening in Philadelphia, and she convinced them to give her husband a shot at trying it, which led to a 40-year relationship with the Philadelphia Orchestra.
Boy, that's wonderful.
It sounds pretty cool.
It does sound
and
very
the woman
cool.
was really amazing. I mean, she's an example of a lady who was doing everything that ladies supposedly couldn't do or shouldn't do or weren't able to do or God didn't mean for them to do it. She did it all. She was hired the very same year that the Lhevinnes were to teach at Juilliard, 1924. And God love her, she died, I don't know, she's 65 or so, something like that, when she died in New York. She lived her life in New York. That day she taught a few students and she went home to her apartment, had a heart attack and died. That was the end of her life. But what a life.
Yeah.
There's a couple other books I just wanted to mention and show them.
Okay.
Because Lhevinne talks about it so much,
Yep.
about Rubinstein's Mastering the Pedal. This is a book, now this is a book which I'd say you have to buy and you have to try these things out yourself at the piano.
Yeah.
All of these kind of books, not so much the Lhevinne because he doesn't give so many examples of things to do. Leimer does. There are lots of musical examples in the piano technique book. But this especially, this is something you have to practice with the book on your own.
Oh, yeah.
These are two different books that Dover's put together. One is, well, they call it The Art of Piano Pedaling.
Yeah.
But one of the books, oh, what did they say? It doesn't matter. But the Guide to the Proper Use of the Pianoforte Pedals and Examples out of the Historical Concerts of Anton Rubinstein. That's the Rubinstein book. And then there's Possibilities of Tone Color by Artistic Use of Pedals by Teresa Carreño. And you might show them that. That's a pretty cool book. You've got a copy of it, don't you?
This? No, I do
You
not.
have it?
No.
You can find a copy of it. There's even used copies on eBay and stuff like that.
Okay.
But this is the kind of thing I think where it would be very interesting. Probably more so for more developed pianists, even an artist. I mean, I'm looking at it myself. And I haven't really got a chance to read the lessons yet in this, but I wanted them to see. This is pretty cool. This is another Dover book. These are piano lessons in the grand style from the golden age of the Etude Music magazine, 1913 to 1940.
From the golden age of the Etude.
So Etude magazine was a really important and popular magazine from, I don't know if it went back into the 19th century, but certainly the very early 20th century. And it continued until the 1950s, I think, or so. But its heyday was from the beginning of its time through probably the beginning of the Depression, the 1920s. Everybody and their mother wrote for this thing. There's some amazing lessons, and I don't think there's any in here in this book, but I have a number of original copies which have lessons from Godofsky, who was really quite a good pedagogue in terms of his teaching. Joseph often wrote articles as well. And there's a number of different well-known pianists and piano teachers, professors in the eastern United States who they take a movement from one of the works of the great composers and really give you a decent little lesson in it in terms of dealing with various problems of playing interpretation. But I haven't looked at it closely enough to really pass any judgment on it.
Wow.
But I found it on eBay for like $8 or something like that. So you can find some good stuff.
Yeah.
And like with the CD of Olga Samaroff, I could find only that recording or somebody's Italian guy's pirated recording of that recording, but they were like going to cost $30 to $50 or more a piece. And I thought, no, I'm not going to do that. I just waited for a little bit, and sure enough, another one in very good condition was available.
That's pretty cool.
$5.49 and $3.99 shipping. So it's less than $10.
Wow. See, he did it the easy way. Push of a button, credit card number. I'm the archaeologist and paleontologist.
He is whipping his hat out in his snake-proof boots.
Yep, I go out there and just...
You got some things you want to show them?
Do I have some things? Well, it's 2 hours and 36 minutes now.
Well, that's all right.
You sure about that?
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's see. What do I have here?
Maybe not the entire bag.
Okay, not the entire bag.
Start
Okay,
up
well, I'll tell you
some
what. You want to do PSI at the movies?
PSI.
Okay. Presenting PSI at the movies.
Oh, you're talking.
I think very well, thank you, Mark. Very, very good.
Okay.
Very interesting show.
PSI at the movies. And I bring to you the very rarely seen, but I found out you could,
plastic on it.
it's unwrapped.
Ooh.
Okay, but I've watched it already on YouTube.
Oh.
It's actually on YouTube. This is called The Double Life of Franz Schubert.
Never heard of it.
Yeah, and it's not a very long movie. It's actually less than an hour, about 50 minutes. It's during the last years of his life. But look at the roster here. It's directed by one Peter Weber, Webber. And the actor playing the master himself is Simon Russell Beale. He'll play Franz Schubert. Co-stars Jason Fleming, who plays Franz von Schober, and Amelia Fox, Caroline Esterhazy, she plays. Okay?
Michael
Apparently-
Fogel was in here. We should find out. Michael Fogel was his singer friend.
Okay. So, anyways, that is the at least the main cast. Now, the musician roster is interesting. Some of these I've never even heard of. Oh, well, let's be truthful here. I've never heard of any of these guys. Maybe you have.
Well, I've heard. I mean, of the Hanover Band with Roy.
Okay,
Gilbert.
Hanover, I've heard of them.
I have some of these Nimbus records.
Yeah, I have some of the Schubert symphonies for those guys. But listen to these roster of musicians they have here. They actually use forte piano experts for this.
Yeah.
Forte piano.
Yeah.
Tell me if you've heard of any of these people. The first name on here is Olga Taverskaya. David Ward. Paul Nicholson. Now remember, this is forte piano players, okay? They're supposed to be specialists at the forte piano. And the last one here is Amanda England. I've never heard of any of these people either. Now, the violinists they have in this movie, Paolo Besnosiuk, never heard of him. Andrew Roberts, Peter Hansen, and Lucy Howard. The cellists, Richard Tunnicliffe. Never heard of him? The other cellist, David Watkin. The violas. We actually have two violas in this one. Jeremy Williams and Gustav Clarkson. We have a double bass player here. I could only imagine he was probably used for the Trout Quintet. Chi Chi, that's the real name, Chi Chi. Nwanoku, it almost sounds like it's Japanese. Here, you tell me how you pronounce that.
Oh, no, that looks African.
That's African?
Wanoku.
Wanoku? Chi-Chi? Okay.
That would be there.
All right, and that's the roster of musicians in this movie.
Well, let's hope they play well. You know,
Yeah, oh, well, they say.
Europeans have been doing
Yeah.
early music training for some time, actually.
Yeah.
There's good schools in Holland, Germany, England, quite a bit.
Yeah.
But I don't know that those people move on always to great super careers. But this would be cool to see. I've never seen this before.
Well, you can now watch it on YouTube.
Cool. What's it called?
It's just called The Double Life of
Franz
Franz Schubert.
Okay.
And it's actually, YouTube actually has it. Because there's a scene in there that's.
What does it deal with his homosexuality?
No.
Oh, it's him and a girl. Oh. Oh.
Figure it out.
The thing that gets him in trouble.
Yes.
That's a sad story there. Real
So
quickly.
it is a sad story because he
There's
was.
a lot of thinking that Schubert ultimately was homosexual. And some very famous people couldn't allow their God to be that way. I had the types of problems. A few people that were short-minded about that. Who cares? But there was a concern, especially after the Congress of Vienna, after the fall of Napoleon. There was a rise in, there's a big change that happened in Vienna at that time. Prince Metternich set up basically a secret police organization, and they started to control public gatherings.
Yeah.
So that all balls and parties, there had to be a police presence there, one policeman.
Yeah.
And then invariably people knew that there were police informers that would be there. in costume and something like that.
Right.
The interesting thing is that this whole thing about the ladies having the fans and talking behind the fans, or
Yeah.
people whispering to each other, getting up at each other's faces and talking very, very closely to one another. This was born out of the fact is that people couldn't trust talking across the room for fear that they'd be heard. Schubert was actually arrested with some of his friends after one gathering. And there's an interesting book that I have. I can't think of the fellow's name. The editor, though, he took examples of Schubert's handwriting from before he was arrested into after. He was let go of like 48 hours later, something like that. But it had an effect on him because he took the handwriting to police handwriting experts in England. And they, use psychology and such to decide, what that handwriting says about the person's mind and so forth.
Yeah.
And Schubert was clearly shaken up by it because one of his good friends, I can't remember who it is now, a poet, he was exiled to some little muddy village out in eastern Hungary, well away from Vienna, for some of the revolutionary stuff he was involved in. It was very anti-revolutionary at the time because, Napoleon was going to create an empire, but in his mind, he was bringing the French Revolution to Europe and getting rid of the aristocracy and all of that. And so he was eventually defeated. And the reaction from the aristocrats for some time was pretty violent. And it even affected Schubert's life. Well, him being gay, especially at that point in his life, we don't know for sure, but there's some thinking that he might have been, especially because he spent all those years with all his male friends in school together, no girls around. Some of his well-meaning friends arranged to get him a prostitute, a female.
Yeah.
And he did the deed,
Yeah.
at least once with her. And that is how he caught syphilis, which is what killed him. Eventually went up. Syphilis untreated will go up and eat your brain from the inside out. And this is what killed him. So they actually think that the poor guy was done in by well-meaning friends.
Jeez.
The irony and all that, but that's another story.
Yeah.
Perhaps.
Well, folks, I hope you enjoyed our content today. I know we didn't get to everything, but the book was going to definitely be one of our big talks for the discussions today. You'll find that even on YouTube, I tried looking to see how many people have actually discussed this book. There's not very many.
No.
Not many at all. And even then, they only lasted 5 to 10 minutes.
Wow.
That was it. And we talked about this
A couple hours.
at least a couple hours, and added some of our own experiences concerning some of the topics here. So, but
Well, can we say thank you to our friend, our guest?
sure.
So, Dmitri, did you have a good time?
Oh yes, Mark, I had very good time. I have learned many things I take back to Novosibirsk with me, and I'm very happy to sit here next to the famous Mr. Elmer, and I'm
honored.
really looking forward to hearing more of your shows. And actually, I get to see myself on the internet. Finally, I get to see myself sitting next to Mr. Elmer. I'm going to get his autograph.
You don't need to do that.
But thank you, everybody. I had a really good time. I wish you well.
Yes, I hope you all had a good time. Please, if you enjoy the content, please subscribe, give us a thumbs up, give us a like. Tell your family and friends about us, okay? Meanwhile, we're looking forward to our next episode.
Yep.
And
We're always scratching the sensitive underbelly of that massive iceberg.
Yes, and believe me, there's going to be plenty more. I think we have enough material for at least 1,000 of these episodes.
I have to figure out what the next book may be.
Okay.
We should do this all the time, but
No,
once
but
in a while.
it's once in a while. I mean,
That was a good discussion.
it was an excellent discussion.
We should take a look at what else we got. We definitely want to do the Leshetinsky. Now, I don't know so much we do all those pictures and that,
Yeah.
but the part at the end
Yeah.
where they discuss different components
Yes.
of making music turn out to be rules for 19th century
Yeah.
playing.
But you know what? Maybe we should do that in parts. Like we could do like maybe a couple chapters, 3 chapters or something for one episode. Then the following.
So
episode.
that it could show the whole thing.
Yeah.
Well, we did better with it this week
Yeah.
than we did the last week because, as I said at the beginning of this show, we were topping off at 3.
Yeah.
Just about the book.
Yeah. Just about the book. Yeah.
But that's passion for you people.
Absolutely. So, this is.
I'm Mark.
I'm Elmer, and we are
PSI. Piano Scene Investigations. Say bye, Dmitri.
Bye, Dmitri!
Yeah.